Please take your seats. The meeting is about to begin. Please stand by. We are going on air in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good afternoon and welcome to the May 1st meeting of the Miami Beach Land Use and Sustainability Committee meeting. Mr. Attorney, let's do a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. I will call the roll. Commissioner Bott?
Hello.
Commissioner Dominguez?
Present.
Commissioner Suarez is absent, and Chairman Fernandez.
Present, and I believe Commissioner Suarez will be arriving a little bit later in our meeting, so with a quorum established, I'm going to recognize the Planning Director for any changes to our agenda, any additions, withdrawals, any changes.
Okay, good afternoon, folks. On the agenda, there are a number of regular items that are going to be deferred to a future date, and so I'm going to announce these. And so if anybody is here for these items, there's no need to stay because these will be deferred to a future date. Item number 9, discuss current incentives for average unit size requirements in residential apartments. Item number 10, explore zoning incentives and identify appropriate zoning districts to encourage the development of schools and other educational facilities. Item number 11, discuss considering the creation of a new capital project to install floating walkways and/or the acquisition of the outlot at 2811 Indian Creek Drive to complete the Indian Creek pedestrian pathway. Item number 12, discuss potential incentives to convert co-living and transient units to apartments in the North Beach TCC district. Item number 13, review the future land use map classification for Pride Park. Item number 14, discuss setting parameters for property owners to present creative development proposals to the City Administration and City Commission as an alternative to invoking the preemptions in the Live Local Act to encourage long-term, non-transient residential developments, including workforce housing that is more compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Item number 16, review the city's current maximum development capacity for water, sewer, electrical, and other utilities and public facilities, and how to better use updated modeling and data for projected future demand to inform cities' planning legislative efforts relating to development. Item number 17, review amendments to the land development regulations to amend the hotel approval process. And finally, number 18, discuss the new short-term rental law passed in New York City known as Local Law 18. Again, the items I just read are being deferred to a future date and will not be heard today.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Colleagues, my intent is to call the agenda within the order in which I have provided in the memo that I circulated earlier today. I'm going to call out of order item number 19, then I'm going to go into the priority agenda, and then we're going to take one item from the regular agenda, item number 15, which was the item relating to the Clevelander. With that, is there a motion to set the agenda?
I'll move it.
The agenda has been moved. Second. With that, by acclamation, we set the agenda. For the record, today's meeting of the Land Use and Sustainability Committee will be conducted in a hybrid format with members of the committee physically present in the Building Department Conference Room located on the second floor of City Hall, and staff and members of the public appearing either in person or virtually via Zoom. To participate virtually, members of the public may dial 888-475-4499 and enter the webinar ID, which is 8505-9923-03#. Or log into the Zoom app and enter the webinar ID, which again is 8505-9923-037. Anyone wishing to speak on an item must click the raise hand icon in the Zoom app or dial *9 if participating by phone. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 19.
Okay, item number 19 is discuss FP&L's storm secure underground program and opportunities to identify the City of Miami Beach neighborhoods that may be eligible for undergrounding of power lines through the program at no cost or expense to city residents or businesses.
Thank you. Is there a motion to bring the item before the body?
Move it.
A second by the chair. With that, the item is before the body. This is an item that's been sponsored by Mayor Minor, Commissioner Dominguez, and myself. So I'm going to recognize my colleague, Commissioner Dominguez, to introduce this item. And I also know we have representatives from FP&L present to speak on the item.
Okay, let me pull up this
For some reason, I didn't get your memo, so my apologies.
No worries.
Okay, I'm just gonna borrow this for a second.
Yes.
All right, so I would like to call up Alex, hi, from FPL, who's gonna give us an update on this item.
Absolutely, we have a PowerPoint ready to go.
And how much time do you need for your presentation? If we could keep it as concise as
The
possible.
presentation should take about 7 minutes.
7 minutes, okay. Could you do 5?
All right. Well, good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Alex Billis. I am Florida Power and Light's External Affairs Manager for Miami Beach. I'm joined by members of our undergrounding team who will be here to answer any technical questions you may have after this presentation concludes. We're here in support of item 19 today, which would facilitate the hardening or undergrounding of distribution laterals in the city through FPL's Distribution Lateral Hardening Program, which has also been referred to in this committee as the Storm Secure Underground Program, which is part of our larger Storm Protection Plan, or SPP. This presentation will provide an overview of the SPP and cover details of lateral hardening, including project selection criteria, procedural steps, and updated projections for Miami Beach. Since the 2004 storm season, Florida Power and Light has made significant investments in our energy grid to improve reliability for customers system-wide. We've hardened 100% of our transmission structures, hardened or underground over 77% of our main power lines, which are also referred to as feeder lines, and we've undergrounded about 48% of our distribution laterals and are continuing to do so through this program. These investments are all funded through FPL Storm Protection Plan, which, in addition to lateral hardening and undergrounding, includes a number of other programs such as distribution and transmission pole inspections, transmission hardening, vegetation management, as well as substation storm surge and flood mitigation. More information on each of these programs can be found in the administration's memo that is attached to this item. In sum, all of these programs work to better protect our power grid against extreme weather events and create a number of benefits for FPL customers, including better reliability, reduced outage time, and mitigated restoration cost. This slide provides you with a visual representation of how power is ultimately delivered to customers. Through the SPP, we've hardened our transmission structures, which carry power at high voltages from our power plants to our substations. We're also making investments in our substations to better protect them against storm surge and flooding. And we continue to harden and underground our feeders and laterals through this program as well. And here's a few pictures of the lines we're talking about. On the left, you'll see the transmission lines. In the middle, you'll see the main lines or the feeder lines. And on the right, you will see the laterals. And these laterals are what we target through our lateral hardening program. Now, Miami Beach, like all cities, has the option to underground its laterals in one of two ways. The city may either elect to do so through the SPP or through a municipally led process. Undergrounding the laterals through a municipally led process requires that the city pays all fees up front, which is generally funded through the creation of one or more special assessment districts. Conversely, through the SPP, there are no upfront costs to Miami Beach residents, as all projects in the SPP are funded through the Storm Protection Plan cost recovery charge. This is something that's paid by all FPL customers system-wide. You pay it, I pay it, it's included in your monthly bill. So there's no upfront cost. Moreover, when you underground through the SPP, FPL is responsible for project implementation. The city would not need to worry about hiring contractors, facilitating project logistics, and things of that nature. And finally, once customers begin receiving underground service, they'll enjoy faster restoration times, fewer vegetation-related outages, and reliability that is 12 times better than the reliability they have with overhead laterals.
And Alex, if we can start wrapping up, because you have 1:30 left.
Okay,
so-
sure.
Thank you.
So quickly here, the way, and this is important, the way we select which laterals get undergrounded is through a data-driven process that's been approved by the Florida Public Service Commission. It takes in information regarding power line performance during named storms, outages due to vegetation issues, and performance during day-to-day operations. Again, FPL does not arbitrarily select which laterals to underground and when. It is all data-driven. And so quickly, since I've got to wrap up here, this is a before and after. You'll see we can take the overhead transformer down. We replace it with a pad-mounted transformer. We install a manhole and a junction box as well. One of the benefits of this item is that it would create a process through which FPL would provide advance notice to the city so that you all could work with the utility providers like AT&T to have them underground their infrastructure as well. Here is a picture of that equipment, and here are the updated projections for Miami Beach. We've got 3 projects that are now going to be filed with the Florida Public Service Commission. This would cover about, I think, 5 or 6 lateral miles on the beach, and then the balance of them would be completed by 2031. And I believe that just about wraps it up. Of course, we'll start with conceptual designs, then we move to customer outreach, which spans the entire length of the project. And then once final designs are submitted, we will then go to the city and request a permit. One last benefit of this plan here is that the administration could condense this timeline by actually developing a expedited permit process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex. And I want to thank you because we've collaborated on a resolution that I've placed on the agenda for the committee's consideration. I want to thank our Chief Deputy City Attorney for drafting this resolution as well, which directs our staff to work with FPL with expediting the processes internally for the utility relocation, making sure that the permitting process is streamlined, and ensuring that we are providing the public with all the necessary information that they need regarding this, because this also deals with right-of-ways that might be near homes in our city. And I think one of the key things about this is that currently only 50% of our city, the customers in our city, are underground, but there's another 50% who are not. And we've seen when this has been our taxpayers paying for this, some residents have had to pay up to $27,000 out of their pocket in order to have their homes and their communities undergrounded. This, by participating in this program, we're allowing this cost savings to our taxpayers through this partnership with FPL. And it's something that I'm very excited about, and Madam Vice Mayor, that we're joining in this effort to deliver this undergrounding project for the residents and the taxpayers of the city of Miami Beach.
I move the item.
So the item is moved. I'll second the item, Vice Chair Bott.
I just had a quick question, if I might.
Yes.
On one of the slides, it said there were 3 projects highlighted in yellow: Venetian, 41st, and Miami Beach. What encompasses the Miami Beach stripe of yellow?
So if we can actually pull the presentation back up, we do have some maps here. Is this your question? We also have.
Well,
There
I
should-
believe that the question was, you highlighted 3 in yellow. What area are those yellows?
Right. Well, the two of them said Venetian and 40th Street, so that seems clear. But there was a grid, a table that had
Right.
things.
So that table right
That
here,
one.
we had
Yes.
248, 938, and 437. So here's 248. So it's that pink, all the pink that you see there would be what is included in each of these projects that's forthcoming in 2025. And then we've got 2 additional projects. You'll see this in green this time on 40th Street. And you'll also see the green here that's fed from the Venetian substation.
And let me ask you something, because I had inquired about North Beach, and you all had looked at performance in North Beach. What's the information? What does the data tell us about
So
performance?
we
in
got
North
with
Beach?
our reliability team, and what we found is that in proportion to the rest of the city, the miles of laterals that have been undergrounded in North Beach is actually in keeping with the rest of the city's numbers as well. And again, this is all driven by data. So it seems as though North Beach generally, from what we can tell, has pretty strong reliability at this point.
Reliability, okay, and that's what this is based on. This is based on reliability.
That's correct.
Got it. Madam
So,
Vice Chair.
just looking at Parkview Island, because I've walked that a million times, is it purely reliability, or is it also withstanding storms? Because we've got, wooden
Right.
light poles that are, or power poles that are at all kinds of precarious
Right,
angles.
I think this is where I had to kind of start, going a little bit quicker. But there are 3 pieces of information that the Public Service Commission uses to evaluate which laterals get undergrounded and when.
And let me just interject there, because it's the Public Service Commission of the state of Florida.
That is correct.
That sets the criteria for this program and to determine which areas are what the data
Yes.
needs to be in order to qualify under the program.
Right, so the 3 pieces of information that they use are performance during named storms, like hurricanes, outages related to vegetation, so it's often the case that, a feeder or lateral is, built right next to a bunch of trees, and if a tree falls on it, that would then accelerate where it's at in the process. And then also just day-to-day performance on blue sky days. So taking those 3 data points, where we develop, a 2-year work schedule.
So it's really about performance, not about aesthetics at all? Like even if it looks like it's about to fall over, as long as it's working fine, it gets pushed back below?
Well, if a pole is about to fall over.
No, I mean, I exaggerate for for dramatic
it is
effect.
not, no, we consider, reliability, the aesthetics of it are not, currently incorporated into
Okay.
that process.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much. With that, the item's been moved, and second, is there any members of the public attending that wish to speak on this item? Seeing none in person wishing to speak on this item. Anyone via Zoom wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand. I see Wayne Roberts. Wayne, welcome. You have 2 minutes.
Hey, doing, Alex? Good afternoon. I'm very concerned that I've heard in the past that we had about 68% coverage in Miami Beach, but I'm not sure if that conversation was around South Beach or Miami Beach in general. And now I hear 50%, which is about the state average. And I'm shocked that density, how many people will be impacted by a loss of power? Miami Beach being more dense than the average in the state. I'm shocked that density did not play a role in the decision-making of data because, poles are 11 times less reliable than underground. If it impacts, 1,000 residents rather than 100, I'm shocked that that did not play a role in choices. And when he talks about the projects through 2031, I have to ask what percentage of the city will be underground at that point? That's slated to be converted to underground. Like at the end of that cycle, what percentage of Miami Beach will be underground? The only other point I have to make is, the city needs to plan for the future, and the future incorporates electric cars. And as far as I understand it, I'm not an expert, that direct current is required to power up these fast charging stations for cars. And now we're going to come out with taxis by Tesla. I think half of the population will be driving electric cars very shortly, at least. And we live in multifamily dwelling units that really can't
Thank you,
support.
Mr. Robert. Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And your concern is well received, and we are working with entities like FPL and others and expanding our public charging facilities in our city lots. And I misspoke because it's not 50%. More than 50% of FPL customers on the city are already receiving their power via underground infrastructure. It's not 50%, it's more than 50%, which is more accurate with what Wayne was mentioning. Jack Finglas, you have your hand raised. I'm not sure if you're here to speak on this item, but if you do, if you are, please introduce yourself. You have 2 minutes. Jack? With that, I'm going to close the public hearing on this item. The item's been moved. It's been second. All those in favor?
Aye.
With that, the item passes. Mr. Director?
Just for clarification purposes, the item's been concluded, and this would be in accordance with the conclusion in the Land Use Committee memo, correct?
This is to send a recommendation to the City Commission to adopt the resolution that we have placed on the agenda with the item.
Okay.
And that's at page 212.
Yes. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 1.
Okay, item number 1 is to discuss the programming for the new Byron Carlisle Geo Bond project for a multi-purpose cultural arts space and possibly workforce housing and/or other uses that are compatible with a cultural arts center and the surrounding neighborhood, and to consider the various options for financial and funding models for the project.
Is there a motion to bring the item before the body?
So moved.
It's been moved, it's been seconded. Commissioner Bond, this is your item. You're recognized.
So this is an item that is near and dear to my heart. The Byron Carlisle has been sitting vacant and unusable for far too many years. It is a space that was built in 1968 as a double movie theater. Over the years, it showed lots of movies to lots of people who had lots of good times there watching movies and doing who knows what else in there. Most recently, it was the O Cinema, the home of the O Cinema, but only part of the movie theater could be used. It had fallen into pretty sad state, and so it couldn't be used to its fullest extent. And O Cinema had to be relocated to the old City Hall here, down here in Miami, in South Beach. And the space has been vacant since then. And we have been working, I was part of this as an activist and a resident before I became a commissioner, and there's been a whole group of people working for years to try to figure out how to best maximize the potential of the Byron Carlisle. At one point, before the GO bond for the arts was funded, the thought was maybe we could try to restore it and bring it back. That didn't happen quickly enough, so the costs went from several $100,000 to several million, and it was recognized that perhaps the best use of that funding would not be to recreate what was there when the way the people consume entertainment has changed so significantly, so a two-screen movie theater may not be the ideal use there. So then the conversation came around to what would be the ideal use there and what could be great and how would we get there. Fast forward to the GO bond where we have $30 million to be put towards restoring, renovating, or rebuilding something new in that space. And a lot of people have gotten involved from the community arts organizations, neighborhood advocates, residents, businesses who've put together some pretty comprehensive plans with the help of Roberto Espejo, who is an architect who helped bring the Arts Center to life and is very committed to this. And so the question before us today, colleagues, is how to spend the $30 million that we have earmarked to the highest and best use, which may not necessarily be the pure financial highest and best use. Is it a cultural arts center with a lot of adaptive and flexible programming for a myriad of very diverse cultural organizations as well as community uses? Is it that plus the possibility of some arts force housing, not to exceed the FAR in the neighborhood, not to ask for variances, but to fit into the envelope of what exists? And how do we do that? Whatever we decide, how do we do it in the fastest and most efficient way possible so that we can use the $30 million that we have earmarked before it turns into 25 or 20 with inflation and rising construction costs? So that is the conversation we have before us. And I know this is a long intro, but I want to make it abundantly clear to anybody who is listening from the neighborhood. There have been very, very strong and passionate advocates for this project in lots of different iterations. I can tell you, from my perspective at least, there is no way we are going back to any of the prior proposals that were put forth by developers in previous administrations where it was basically a tower of ostensibly affordable housing or micro units with a tiny gray box for us to be finished. The goal here is first and foremost a multifaceted, community-based cultural complex. And if we're able to deliver that with some housing on top of it, then that is great. But we are not putting things the other way around. It is not going to be a tower with a nice theater in it. I just want to make that abundantly clear so that anybody who's reading through the documents does not get concerned about the thoroughness of the presentation that you guys have put together with all of the backup history and all the iterations of conversations that have gone through. So again, abundantly clear, full-on community complex for the arts first. If we can figure out a way to do Arts Force housing on top of that in a way that makes financial sense, then that's gravy.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And just for the record, I forgot to say that when I called the item, this item will be discussed until 5:50. At 5:50, I am going to conclude this item, whichever point we're at, and we're going to move on with our agenda. With that, Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you. I remember when Commissioner Mark Samulin was on the commission, he fought hard for the Byron Carlisle. So did many residents that were out there, and many passionate residents included having petitions on what they wanted. So the vision I have for it is to keep the structure, use the GO bond. I think I've heard from many developers that Art First housing, workforce housing, the numbers really don't work. North Beach has about half a dozen high-rises that are coming, and the density in that area is going to be insane. And that's in an island where FDOT already told us that we're at capacity, there's no more room. So I would like to hear from the administration, not necessarily now, but in the future, what can they do to make this a beautiful cultural center for the community using the GO bond money that's already been allocated? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. I see we have the city administration before us. Liz, you're welcome to present on the item.
Absolutely. I'm going to tee this up. Good afternoon, committee members. Elizabeth Muro, Interim Director for Facilities and Fleet Management. And we have taken into consideration all the items that are going to be discussed before you, programming, a standalone model, and one that includes workforce housing. And we're going to provide you with some information. I'm going to tee this up. And Daniel Alzuri will provide you with the rest.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Daniel Alzuri, Facilities and Fleet. Let me get myself organized here a little bit. No worries. Sure.
I'm going to ask IT if we could work on the microphone for the presenters so that we could hear them better, because it's a little bit harder to hear here in the front. So
I'll try to project better. Yeah. Sorry. So the administration was tasked with exploring options for delivery of a multi-purpose, multidisciplinary cultural center at the location of the Byron Carlisle. In working this out, the following was considered. The first was a report from AMS Research and Planning that looked at the cultural landscape of Miami Beach and the surrounding areas. And I'm glad to say that there's an abundance of great art around us that can keep this place busy year-round. They identified 5 to 8 anchor tenants that could be that can be operators, frankly, if we wanted them to. And then beyond that, another 10 organizations that could be frequent users, and another 10 that can be occasional but regular users. So there's plenty of product to present at this cultural center, and it is a proof of concept that something like this will thrive in North Beach. The report also touches on self-operating, but leaves the door open to other governance structures depending on which way the project goes and what would best serve the final cultural center. The report did not include an operating plan or pro forma, which will then inform a lot of the finances on this. So that was one, the report from AMS. The next thing we looked at were the concept drawings. The first from Schulman Associates, which was solicited by the city, I believe in 2021. And the second, the unsolicited Friends of the Byron Carlisle design that was created by Roberto Espejo. The Schulman Associates had the cultural center at about 10,000 square feet. And we know that that's not acceptable. The Roberto Espejo design has the cultural center at a generous 49,000 square feet. As we start preparing financial models on this, we are confident that we can get it up to and beyond 35,000 square feet of cultural space. We're trying to get it as high up as into the 40s. But that will come as we start developing this project, as we bring on a developer, as we start looking at designs, we can really start honing in the numbers. A lot of the numbers in the cash flows that you have that were submitted as Exhibit, I believe, D, are very, very general. It is a starting place. So I ask that everybody look at it with a truckload of salt. More than anything for us, it was a proof of concept that we can, within these boundaries, create what we're talking about. So both of these make us confident that, one, we can create a substantial cultural center in that space with or without the workforce housing. The money comes into play when we start talking about one versus the other. The 49,000 square foot cultural center, upon back of envelope pricing, is probably twice as much, if not more, than what we have in the GO bond. The tough part with that size of cultural center, without the workforce housing, is that the burden of cost of operation lies squarely on the art organization, and there'll have to be a commitment from the city for subsidy, for ongoing subsidy. So that's the standalone. We'd likely deliver that through a design build RFQ. If we were to design to budget, we would probably be looking at a cultural center that was a little bit less than 30,000 square feet, maybe between 25 and 30,000 square feet, if we designed to the $30.5 million budget. So it's a little bit smaller than what was proposed by Friends of the Byron.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
So you said design build. Why that way instead of design bid build, which would usually get us better pricing?
Okay, we're gonna take this question, the future questions just through the chair, and, and then we're gonna keep all of the rest of our questions to the end of the presentation.
Okay, that is something that I'd have to confer with CIP and see what gets us the most value. There are certain requirements that we need to hit from a state level. I believe that they require us to follow certain paths if we, as the city, are going to put out the RFQ. There is design bid build, there's design build, finance, and operate, which is what we're going to get into now in the P3. But we would, depending on which way we want it to go, we would explore all options and really try to find which one brings the best value to what we're trying to do. So apart from the standalone, now we have the cultural center with workforce housing. This opens some financing doors for us. The way that we would likely deliver this is through a P3, in which we would create or contract a 501c3 to deliver, finance, and ultimately operate the cultural center. That needs to be explored a little bit more. They would also carry the bond needed to cover the construction gap. At no point will the city ever lose ownership of the land. They would retain ownership of the land, and we can recall the building at any point by satisfying the bond. So whatever agreement we enter into the 501c3, whether it's one that we create or one that we find, an arts organization that we find, the contract is very much one-sided. We set the rules of the road. I think that based on a second round of calculations of numbers, that we can get this upwards of 35,000 square feet for the cultural space. My goal is to get it upwards of 40,000. But again, we're so early in the process that it's really hard to start minimizing the margins, the little bits here and there that we're looking at contingency, the cost, we're trying to project cost. And all of this is being done pro bono by these developers, by the developer and by the architect. So they're willing to help us, but really to seal their name on it, and we need to proceed a little bit down the line with this project. And ultimately, the workforce housing would bring residual cash flows that over time, as the bond is paid down, will completely cover the operating costs of the cultural center. Maybe not in the first 5 years. The first 5 years, what we're trying to do with this is really thread a needle. We want to get the most cultural center we can for the money we have, and which really in year 2 through 6 is going to be a very tight financial situation for the cultural center. But what we'd like to do is figure out a way to get them through the first 6 years, and then the back end, the net revenue explodes.
Thank you. Madam Vice Chair.
So my understanding is that this falls within the boundaries of the CRA, and part of the CRA commitment that we have is that we have to build workforce housing. One of the biggest challenges we have for workforce housing is finding land upon which to build. My primary goal when I started off helping to advocate for the Byron Carlisle with the Friends, I don't know, Daniel, I don't even know how many years ago that was, but quite a few. Nancy Liebman was involved, and a lot of us were involved. And Commissioner Samuelin was a huge. I remember watching him get bullied by his colleagues with literally, if you don't support us in what we want, we're going to tank that. And I was horrified, and here I am, all these years later. Anyhow, we have to build workforce housing in North Beach within the bounds of the CRA. Building workforce housing to some degree on this facility within the envelope of what's permitted by the FAR without asking for any variances is possible, and it helps generate revenue to cover the costs of a cultural center, which means it can do more community outreach, community programming, and give it more room to breathe and maneuver. There's no criteria stipulating how much workforce housing we have to build, so it's really a question of sliding the scale to maximize the amount of space for cultural programming and the most kinds of facilities we can offer the community with some workforce housing. So I am inclined to do that because I believe that it gives the cultural center most room to operate. And the most possible flexibility without sweating about covering their nut every year. The other thing is that a lot of, I live there, so I know exactly how disastrous those roads are and how tenuous the infrastructure is, and how we do not want to necessarily have a ton of new buildings. We already have too many going up that were promised to the neighborhood as housing for the missing middle or workforce housing, and now we're either micro units or affordable housing starting at $800,000. So this would give the folks who work at the cultural arts organizations a way to live and work and hopefully play in one area, as opposed to having to drive across the bridge every day, which makes our roads much less it's not thousands of people who would be employed there, but every little bit helps. So I would like to, that's where I land on this. I want to make sure that we maximize and get as close to the goal of 39,000 square feet or, whatever it was that Roberto had said, maximize the cultural arts space and give them the best opportunity for financial success and fulfill our obligation for the CRAs. And we will be getting money from the Galbert Tower that's going, that's nearing completion, and all the other 12 buildings that are coming up in the next couple of years. So to me, there's a lot of ways to help finance this. We don't have to write a check tomorrow because this is a longer process. But so colleagues, that's where I fall on this.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. What I'd like to do is give the opportunity to some of our other colleagues who are present. Commissioner Suarez, welcome. Commissioner Magazine, welcome. I don't know if you want to chime in on this before we open it up to the public, to individuals from the public that may want to speak on this item. Commissioner Magazine, Commissioner Suarez.
Sure. Thank you, especially as I'm not on the committee, but just so we all know where all of us stand, cards are on the table. We are in a housing crisis. We have all sat here on the planning board, on commission, and said, oh, well, of course we need housing affordability. We have the chance to do something. We need to put our money where our mouth is. How many times are we going to look at our constituents move out of Miami Beach and say, oh my gosh, we're losing residents, and then not vote for housing? On our land, workforce housing. Full stop. I cannot support anything on our land that we are not providing workforce housing when we are losing thousands of residents, the only city in all of Florida, the only city. We're in a housing affordability crisis, and we're not delivering any housing for normal working class people. That is my foremost priority during my time here, that and public safety. So I look for this as an opportunity to do so.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. So you said you needed more time on figuring out the specifics on how you can do workforce housing, or can you explain what that timeline would look like?
Sure, through the chair. Really what we need is more expertise. So we need to engage a developer, we need to start down the line of defining the project, defining the parameters of the project. There's only so much that we can do in, pro bono world, where I'm having conversations with people saying, can you tweak this, can you tweak that? We've gotten it to a place where we feel confident that this is executable. We have probably 80 to 90% of the information we need to really start down the line of an RFP for this. But we need to decide on the governance, potential governance structure. If we're going into a P3, we do need to see how we're going to treat that 501c3, if we're going to go seek one like we did in Collins Park, or if we're going to empower one to execute this for us and then operate the building on the back end.
I'm sorry, just to clarify, because you and I had a conversation about this,
Sure.
but for my colleagues and anybody else listening, when you talk about operate the building, you're talking about operating the housing component. The Cultural Arts Center would be a different conversation.
It can be either or. We could hire a 501c3, like in Collins Park, to manage the housing portion. We can also empower a 501c3 cultural institution to manage the cultural and then hire out the management of the residential.
Because I think that's not specific to this conversation. It gets talked about down the road, and it's a much more nuanced conversation. So the decision on how we proceed is not predicated on who's going to be managing which piece of this.
Correct. And part, through the chair, part of what the next steps would be is, if we decide we do want to go with workforce housing, is starting to define some of that criteria, starting to define what the nonprofit intermediary would look like, the role they would play, the agreement between the city and that intermediary, and then start with that information. And part of it is an operational plan and a pro forma. So as we start developing a pro forma, we understand the finances of the cultural center and how they would contribute to the overall project.
Thank you so much. I'm just gonna put my comments on the record. First and foremost, I understand the need for housing in our community, but I also see a tremendous amount of development occurring in North Beach. I also, we all live with the increasing demands, with the increasing stress on our traffic infrastructure and our limited roadways. Just last week, I was meeting with a cultural institution, I would say a cultural anchor of North Beach, and them expressing to me the great concerns that they have about the very limited availability of parking up in North Beach. And I just get concerned how the city now also, developing on its own property such amount of density could further aggravate the challenges with parking, which we already know is bad enough, even when we're looking to create parking zones up in North Beach. The challenges that we have with a very limited and congested roadway network up in North Beach. So I feel that I need more information about this. But if I were to say today, if I had to make a decision today, I'd be more inclined to see us work on a standalone cultural arts center that can be delivered with the funds that the electorate, that the voters have already approved through the GOB referendums. That's what I feel will will deliver better. And we can always work on our policies and other opportunities that we have on other lands to deliver on workforce housing, especially on our policies to help advance that. But there is a parking crisis up in North Beach. There is a traffic crisis up in North Beach. And the last thing that the taxpayers' government needs to be doing is contributing to that. That's my perspective of it, but I respect the opinions and the initiatives of all of my colleagues. I'm going to open up for public comment. Members of the public attending the meeting in person wishing to speak on this item, please line up on the podium. I'm going to limit comments to 1 minute so that we can stay on schedule. And I'm going to recognize David Sexton. David, welcome. You have 1 minute.
I am so glad that we're actually starting to work on the Byron. The Friends of the Byron presented this concept, and I feel like first and foremost, it's a performing arts center and that has to happen. But to your point, the same arts organization that you're speaking about, the Bandshell, has 50 employees. None of them can live on Miami Beach because they're forced to live off the beach, and they're forced to commute every day to reach their workspace. So I think that housing above it creates a situation where you're diminishing traffic, you're diminishing the need for parking. If you're allowing the people that are living in the building to work in the building, that is the future of housing in our area, and workforce housing is important. But I wouldn't want to see this project derailed over that. What we really need is a performing arts center in North Beach.
Thank you, David. Thank you for your participation. Daniel, welcome. You have 1 minute.
Thank you so much. Hi, Commissioners. Daniel Serraldo with Miami Design Preservation League. I remember, yes, that was back in 2020 when we were just starting with the COVID craziness, and we did the Zoom about saving the Byron Carlisle and also the essence of the arts and culture status of the Byron. So it is exciting to see now that this is moving forward. I'm not sure if I hope there will be some study about if there are elements that could be preserved from the structure, even if it's adapted or rebuilt. But there are some like funky MIMO aspects that still remain, so hopefully that will be considered. Also, I did want to mention that the North Beach Master Plan led to an increase in FAR, and the city owns this lot, so if you don't use it for something good, like with a public benefit like workforce, then it may be a lost opportunity. So looking forward to more discussion.
Thank you, Daniel. Jack Finglass, you're welcome to comment. You have 1 minute. Welcome, Jack. Jack, you have to unmute yourself.
I fully support Commissioner Bott and Commissioner Fernandez, and I was most interested in Commissioner Magazine's comments. I think workforce housing is extremely important, and I look forward to having a successful marriage of the two in this most important project. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Wayne Roberts, you're welcome to comment on this item. You have 1 minute.
Hey, I appreciate all your comments. We certainly need workforce housing. My concern is around the density in North Beach. It's gotten way out of hand with developers approving or lobbying for higher and higher density, and now we're going to add more density. So that concerns me. We shot this down when Matisse presented it. I don't know when, like 2018 or something. A P1 or P3 project. David Sexton showed me a design. I didn't like the design that was presented. It was just way too dense, and it killed the look of that area. So it's a conflicting thing. If we just leave it empty and in poor shape, it's the worst outcome. So we need to move forward, but we need to move forward in an educated way that balances everything that concerns the city. And I don't want to go one way or the other.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. All right, so I'd like to, okay, Elizabeth, welcome. You have 1 minute to speak. And with that, I'm going to be closing the public hearing.
Hi, good afternoon, good evening. Hadn't had any intention on speaking on this, but I do live in North Beach. We do experience horrible traffic. We also experience a housing shortage, real housing that needs more than 200 square feet to live in. And I would support the cultural center. I also want to see housing, and it can be done with CRA funds. It can be done with a lot of different ways. It does also need to be, design build doesn't work because you can just stop in the middle of that, and that's the end. We need to do a real RFP and get going on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. With that, Commissioner Bott, this is your item. How would you like to proceed with your item?
Well,
Uh,
I'm not going to make a motion yet. I'm going to just say something then.
Okay, yes. So Commissioner
okay.
Bott and then Commissioner Suarez.
So I just want to remind my colleagues that the project as it is proposed is not covered by the $30 million that was earmarked by the GO bond. So additional funding would have to be found, and workforce housing could help generate that money. I live walking distance, a few blocks from that intersection at 71st and and I know how absolutely terrible it can be, but I don't want the unfortunate decisions over the last decade to keep us from making an excellent decision for the next decades. We granted short-term rentals. Short-term rentals are allowed up there. We've granted 500 plus micro units. We've got another development that's claiming to be workforce housing at 200 square feet, a little further west in North Beach. We need to put people who actually work here and live here and will take their cars off their roads into the mix. And we need to find the full amount of funding to get to the cultural center that we want, that has been proposed. What is illustrated here is not a final design of what it's going to look like from the outside. It's showing how the pieces can come together to provide the best possible use of the interior space. The outside, the external bits, the repurposing, the cheese holes and woggles, if you look back to the original design of the theater from 1968,
Commissioner
it looks
Bott,
very
we need
different.
to be wrapping up this
So,
item, sorry.
so I just want to make sure that as we move this forward to the commission, we're not losing sight of the whole opportunity. And if you go back to the North Beach Master Plan, having this kind of a facility with the ground floors activated and some workforce housing going up to 7 stories in its entirety, not 7 stories above the cultural arts centers, is exactly what was proposed, not a 22-story tower sticking up like a giant middle finger in the middle of North Beach. So
With that, would you like to make a motion?
I would like to move this to the commission with a favorable recommendation to proceed with the project and investigate how to provide the most full, complete, as presented cultural complex with some level of workforce housing above it.
Okay. Is there a second on the motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, okay, so the item's been properly moved and second. Commissioner Suarez, you wanted to just...
Yeah, just
make a
real quick,
comment?
not to take too much time. There's a lot of discussions about traffic, and there's valid concerns that if we build something, is it going to add more traffic? And if we have workforce housing for the Cultural Arts Center, can we require that they work there to live there?
I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to look that up.
Therefore, we eliminate the need for them to travel, obviously, or get into a car, or even have a car.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Suarez. And I just want to put for the record, if there were workforce housing in this building, working at this building, I wouldn't want to be living in this building. I want to have some separation between work life and personal life. But with that, the item's been properly moved and second. Mr. Attorney, let's call the roll on this item.
Sure. Commissioner Bott?
Yes.
Commissioner Dominguez?
I don't think it's ready yet to go to the commission, so the city told us that they needed more time, so I'm a no.
Okay. Commissioner Suarez?
Yes.
And Chairman Fernandez?
I'm going to vote no, even though I believe that's a tie vote. What it does is the item still moves forward, but I believe that makes it an unfavorable recommendation.
That's right.
Okay. All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
If it moves forward to the commission as an unfavorable recommendation, what does that mean for the future of this project? I mean, have we just effectively killed it? I mean, that is a wildly unintended consequence that I will not be okay with.
The committee is only advisory to the city commission, and the city commission gets the guidance of the committee, but does not have to accept the decision of the committee and can make its own determination. It doesn't have to accept the same recommendation of the commission.
So if
Correct me,
the-
Mr. Attorney, if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
So through the chair, if the commission hears what we heard and still feels like this is interesting, we just don't have enough information, it could just kick it back to a committee or open and continue to 2 months down the road or something like that. So a no here or an unfavorable, or whatever it is, a neutral recommendation up to the commission doesn't end this project. It just,
And it also could give staff more time to do some of the work, get some information, and maybe by that time, people can feel more comfortable. I personally think there should be perhaps more public input from North Beach, but I think we need to move forward with the item, and the commission can make its own determination. All right.
And just for the record, this was a dual referral to the Land Use Committee and the Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee will have its own recommendation.
Okay, great. All right, thank you so much, colleagues, with that. Colleagues, let's introduce item number 2.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 2 is to amend the land development regulations to create an application fee for administrative review of development applications submitted under the Live Local Act. This was a dual referral to both the Land Use and Sustainability Committee and the Planning Board.
Thank you. Is there a motion to bring the item before the table? Okay, it's been moved and second. This is Commissioner Rosen-Gonzalez's item. Commissioner Rosen-Gonzalez is attending via Zoom. You're welcome to speak on the item. Commissioner, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Hello.
Good afternoon.
Okay.
Welcome.
Okay, so let me give you my thinking. This item is not fully baked, and when I saw what staff wrote, so my idea was, especially in the North Beach area, a lot of the developers that are building these large buildings that are going to become short-term rentals, given Live Local, they might come back and want to make changes, to their building permit. And before we start to get towers there as tall as, what's the tallest building in the area, Tom? Would that be the Akoya?
In the overall North Beach area, Akoya is about 460 feet, so that's the tallest building.
Yeah, imagine, okay? So before it turns into tall towers like that, my idea, and this is something that we actually have to probably do fairly quickly. I don't even like talking about it, but I would like to change some of the fees that we have and look at some of the incentives. I think when I mentioned this item, it wasn't just fees, it was fees and incentives. Is that not right, Tom, or were they two separate items? Because I'm all confused now. But anyway, I wanted to look at the fees and see what we could do to possibly discourage anyone from changing the plans that we have. Because I think that if we get preempted on this, and I think we have to act quickly, which is why I referred it to the planning board. I don't know exactly if it was heard at the planning board or not, but I'm interested in hearing from Nick, what do you think that we could do, Nick, without, to create a situation where you might not want to change your building permit?
I think, first of all, this item is focused on fees for the administrative review of Live Local Act applications. And so right now we don't have a fee in our code for that review. So if the Land Use Committee transmits this item with a favorable recommendation, at that point it would go to the Planning Board as an ordinance creating a fee. The amount of that fee has to be limited to cover the city's costs in connection with reviewing Live Local Act applications. So
what's the highest we could go, Nick? What's the highest we could charge?
It would have to be based on the planning department's actual costs in reviewing these applications. So the recommendation in the memo is a base site plan review fee of $3,125 and then a per square foot fee. And then we would also be able to charge for the cost of the mailers. But Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez also asked about what incentives might be available. And I think.
And if I may, I'd just like to interject there, because the item that we have before us, what the City Commission referred to the committee, and what we're discussing today are regulations on creating an application fee. I don't want to mix into incentives, because that's going to be a larger policy discussion that we don't have on the agenda today, and we have a pretty packed agenda with a
Okay,
limited
well,
time
I'm gonna
schedule.
get through this pretty quickly. I have a separate item on incentives, because when you guys go and you look at the incentives in North Beach, they're ridiculous. Like, they make no sense, and they're really supposed to encourage this large scale growth of short-term rentals, which I don't think a lot of people want, somebody building, but the train has left the station and the building permits have mostly been issued. And so it's going to be built. So I guess if the administrative fee is $3,000, that's fine, plus mailing fees. I'd like to see it higher. Nick, can't we make it 50,000?
I think anytime we adopt a fee by ordinance, some study is involved as far as what are the city's actual costs, right? So I think we would be happy to sit down with planning and look at those numbers.
I'm interested in hearing what my colleagues have to say. I think that what they're recommending is too low. I think that given the parameters of the Local Act, it should be pricey, because they're circumventing our zoning laws, and there's really nothing we can do about it. So I think that administratively we should do as much as possible. I don't know what you guys have in mind in terms of fees, but I'm interested in hearing what you have to say about this and if you support this.
Thank you, Commissioner. I want to recognize Commissioner Dominguez, and then I'll make some comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And this question is actually for Nick. It says here that this could conflict with a section of our LDR code. So would we be able to put in the LDR live local subject to additional fees in order to keep other workforce housing not to have fees?
I think that as far as the workforce portions of the project, I would recommend treating those the same as a non-Live Local Act workforce project, right? Because ultimately those particular units are the same, are going to be subject to the same requirements in our code.
And thank you, Commissioner Dominguez. Perhaps something that could be considered is, I don't know if we can just say it can be a $50,000 fee, because again, it is based on the review of staff costs. It actually has to be substantiated and something, so that if it does get challenged, the city can go in and demonstrate, okay, this is how we determined this fee, and not lose in a court setting. However, what I do feel that we could look at is the exception of applying these fees to non-affordable and non-workforce housing. I think that those who wish to utilize the Live Local Act to develop in our city, they are already getting a big incentive. They are receiving a big development incentive. This waiver of these fees in our LDRs in section 2.3.5 was intended to be, okay, as a catalyst. How do we get the industry, the market, to develop the workforce housing that we need in our city, and what fees can we waive for them? They don't need that incentive if they're getting all of this extra development incentive that the state legislature has given them through the land development regulations. And so perhaps what we could do is for Live Local Act projects, we don't apply section 2.2.3.5, which currently exempts workforce and affordable housing from these fees? And I don't know if that'd be possible, Mr. Attorney.
And I think that's, your question, Mr. Chairman, is similar to Commissioner Dominguez's question. I would ask Tom, I think the existing waiver for affordable or workforce units is a waiver of land use board fees, right? So.
That's correct.
Okay, so in that case, since Live Local projects are going to be reviewed entirely at the administrative level, perhaps we could draw a distinction there to say, you know, if you do go through our land use boards, then the fee incentive would apply. But if you do not, then the per square foot rate that would apply to the market rate portion of the project would apply to workforce units as well if it's a Live Local project. So we could look at that.
Okay, great. Colleagues, are there any other comments from the dais on this item?
No, I think the points being made are good, and I'd like to see us try to exert whatever leverage we have left to us to have people work with us, not against us.
Is there a motion before the body?
I want to make a motion.
this
Oh, I
moved-
can't
this
make a
moved and
motion.
seconded.
Can I give an idea for a motion?
Yes, through the chair, and your
Well, I can't. I'm raising my hand, but I'm not in the room. I just want to get your attention, Alex. Okay, Alex. So,
Yes, you're
Commissioner.
recognized.
Okay, here's what I propose. I propose that if it's Live Local, none of section whatever applies. They have to comply with parking requirements that because right now there are no parking requirements. So they should have to pay the administrative fee. They should have the same parking requirements that right now do not apply to regular workforce or affordable housing acts. And then also they would have to pay all land use boards and go through the regular process. Would you guys agree if I write this up to send it on in and let's, at least.
I want to agree with you. I just want to recognize our Chief Deputy City Attorney on this because I sense and I feel and I recall hearing in Tallahassee a certain level of preemption as it related to parking. And so I'm not sure what can we legislatively do at this juncture as it relates to parking regulations.
That's correct. The version, the amendments to the Live Local Act that were approved by the legislature this year would have an automatic parking reduction for qualifying projects if they're within a certain distance of, let's say, a bus stop or a transportation hub. So, and I believe it's a 20% reduction for qualifying projects. So I think you're absolutely entitled to adopt a fee for the administrative review process. That you can definitely do, and that should cover staff's review time, which is going to be more intensive depending on the size of the project. So per square foot is an appropriate measure, and then the city's hard costs of any required notices or mailers. That you can absolutely include as well.
All right, Commissioner
But
Rosa
Nick,
Gonzalez,
right.
is that good?
Well, it is, but I mean, Nick, right now, if you're building affordable or workforce housing in the city of Miami Beach, you don't have any parking requirements in certain areas, correct?
Is that correct, Tom?
No, if I could, through the chair, answer that, Commissioner. Workforce and affordable housing has a reduced parking requirement, but it did not eliminate the parking requirement. So there's a reduced parking requirement for workforce and affordable housing units.
So I would like them to have the parking requirement minus the 20% as mandated with the state of Florida. I would like to include that too, because I think that's really important. There's a real lack of parking. Everybody knows that, especially in the North Beach area. So I would, if somebody would make a motion to, if possibly, I don't know how you feel about that, but the administrative fee and also
Restoring the parking requirements for
restoring
Live Local
the parking
projects.
requirement minus the 20%.
Minus the 20%.
Yeah, I think
Mr. Attorney,
that's the right thing to
would
do.
that be in proper posture if it is moved?
I think the increased parking requirement would probably need to apply to all affordable or workforce housing units in that particular district, and then Live Local, as Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez stated, would, if the 2024 bill is signed by the governor, then the Live Local projects would get a 20% reduction if they're eligible. But I think if you're going to increase the parking requirement as a zoning matter, for certain types of residential units, I think that would need to apply to all workforce and affordable units in that district.
So, Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez, I think, you know, given the nature of this item, this is an item I believe was duly referred to our board and to the planning board. I think we need to bifurcate the items here then. I think you have good policy that you brought forward that protects the city and it relates to the review fees. But I think there's a motion on the table on that item, and I think it was seconded by Commissioner Suarez. So the review fees was moved and seconded. Let's open up the floor if there's any member of the public wishing to speak on the item that we have before us as it relates to the fees, review fees, administrative fees for Live Local. Any members of the public present wishing to speak on that? Via Zoom, any members of the public on Zoom wishing to speak on that? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. The review fees was moved and second. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, so the item, that proceeds. Commissioner, I think you are onto something as it relates to parking, and I would encourage you perhaps with the committee's backing to bring forward a separate item, and perhaps with the same level of urgency, duly referred to planning and to this committee as to address the issue of the LDR amendment relating to parking throughout the zoning districts.
And Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez, Tom and I would be happy to work with you on that referral.
Would everybody just want to co-sponsor it with me? Are you guys okay with that? Or you want me to just go it alone, whatever you want?
No, I'm happy to co-sponsor. You have the vice chair, you have Commissioner Dominguez, Commissioner
Okay, so
Suarez.
there you have it. Could you guys prepare something for May 15th possibly so that we can get it through the pipeline?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez.
Your participation is always welcome, and I'd appreciate it. With that, we are closing this item. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 3.
Okay, Mr. Chair, item number 3 is to discuss an initiative to pilot a decibel system for noise enforcement, including the installation of noise meters in the entertainment district.
Thank you, Mr. Director. This is there a motion on the table to bring the item before us?
I'll second.
It's been moved and second. The item is properly before the body. This is an item that was presented to us in the supplement of our agenda, in our supplemental materials, page 88. I brought this item forward first and foremost because throughout our city, frankly, a number of individuals have come and approached me about entertainment. You know, they want entertainment in their business. They feel that they can't survive without entertainment. And my response to them is, well, our residents can't survive in our city without proper enforcement of noise. And you can't have more entertainment, and we can't add fuel to the problem unless we provide an objective mechanism through which to enforce this. Last year, we had engaged in a process to study the conversion of our enforcement to a decibel system, and possibly regulate the use of noise meters in our enforcement process. And I'd like to recognize the planning director to speak about the study that was done last year having to do with this, the findings and the recommendations for us to consider.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, a similar item was referred to the Land Use Committee in 2022, and it was discussed by the Land Use Committee at a couple of meetings in 2023. At the April 2023 meeting of the Land Use Committee, an updated proposal from the city's sound consultant, who did agree to participate in this meeting via Zoom if there are any questions, was submitted that would basically create a pilot program for a decibel-based noise standard program. And the last submittal that was discussed by the Land Use Committee was attached to the addendum. It was from March 1st of 2023. And the noise pilot program that was proposed at the time would cover the properties fronting Washington Avenue and Collins Avenue between 8th Street and 10th Street. And the scope, and we've provided a summary in the Land Use Committee memo, would include mapping existing noise that could be used as a baseline for the purpose of creating a future decibel noise ordinance. The scope also included identifying potential locations for the deployment of stationary sound level meters, performing an on-site noise survey within the geographic limits of the study area to establish typical sound levels, using sound level data collected on-site to develop noise heat maps of the area utilizing the commercial sound plan program, the preparation of a report summarizing the findings, and a business owner opt-in option was also included in case there were private properties that wanted to participate in this. This scope did have financial costs which were included in the proposed study, and if something similar was to move forward, funding would have to be identified for either this fiscal year or next fiscal year.
Thank you, Mr. Director. Thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Attorney, the current basis for enforcement of noise, what is it when the city receives a noise complaint and code enforcement responds to a location that is the subject of a noise complaint? What is the mechanism, the basis used to determine whether it's valid or not in the city's enforcement?
The standard in the noise ordinance is whether, and this is consistent with the Miami-Dade County noise ordinance, but whether noise is unreasonably loud, excessive, unnecessary, or unusual. The code sets forth a number of instances where noise is presumed to be unnecessarily loud or excessive, and after 11 o'clock at night, noise is presumed to be a violation of the noise ordinance if it is plainly audible at a distance of 100 feet or more from the source.
And so, who determines if noise coming from an establishment at any given time of the day? Let's say you work in a hospital, you've just gone done with a 14-hour night shift. You're getting home at 7 o'clock in the morning, and you need to rest to start your next shift. And so who determines if the person who is causing noise at 10 o'clock, at 11 o'clock, midday, whether that's unreasonable or excessive in any way?
It's up to the responding code compliance officer to determine whether the noise is in violation of our code.
But is it based on because it's being heard at a distance?
Before 11 o'clock, that presumption does not apply.
Let's say it's midday, it's lunchtime, let's say, and I'm taking a nap and I can't take a nap, or someone that just worked a night shift is trying to rest, or you're trying to work at home, or you're trying to study. How is it based because it's being heard at a certain distance? Like how is unreasonable determined? I can be a very reasonable person, but someone else might be unreasonable. So what's the standard of reasonableness?
Good afternoon, committee members. Robert Rosenwald from the City Attorney's Office. I can just help out with this a little bit. The reasonable in legal terms is by definition objective. It is not a subjective standard. If you say reasonable, that as a matter of law means objective. Would a reasonable person find it to be unreasonably loud? I can tell you as a matter of practice, in the example that you gave where somebody is in their residential unit and they complain that music is too loud, I can tell you that what code does is goes to the unit and with all doors and windows shut, they listen to hear if they can hear the offending music or noise or whatever is coming from the neighbor or the restaurant or whatever's next door. If they can hear it in that unit, they issue a code violation. If they can't hear it, they don't. And so in that particular example, that's how that works out.
And even let's say, because if at night it's 100 feet of distance, let's say during the day it's not 100 feet distance. you know, and you can still hear it in the unit, still unreasonable?
That is my understanding of currently how code enforcement.
And have we encountered ever any situation in which a, you know, a violation has been tossed by the special master because it can't be upheld as reasonable at the special master, as unreasonable?
I mean, I couldn't tell you a specific example, but I'm absolutely sure that that has happened, because that would be the defense. I mean, the defense was my noise wasn't unreasonable, and if you put on evidence to show that your music wasn't unreasonable, the special magistrate may very well find in your favor.
And if we had a decibel system that can show, you know, a reading in addition to, so not only did a code enforcement officer show up at the property and determine the noise to be, you know, unreasonable, which I think could be, you know, subjective. You know, if they show up at the property and they have a reading, couldn't that potentially be used also in a special master hearing?
A decibel-based system is a policy call that you all can make if you want. There's challenges to both methods. The benefit of the current system of unreasonably loud is that it has been upheld by the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. So the exact wording of our ordinance, the way it is now, we know is, at least in the 11th Circuit, legal. I can tell you that a small portion of our current ordinance was recently declared vague by a Miami-Dade state court, which is we currently have appealed that to the 3rd DCA, and we think we have a very good chance of winning that. But there is, just so you, in full disclosure, there is a small portion of our current ordinance that has been declared vague, unconstitutionally vague, by a lower state court.
And which portion of the code is that?
The portion that I don't have. Actually, let me read it to you. It is. Or at any time with louder volume than is necessary for the convenient hearing for the person or persons who are in the room, vehicle, or chamber in which such machine or device is operated and who are voluntary listeners thereto. There's a bunch of standards in the.
So unreasonably loud. Unnecessarily loud.
That one particular provision.
And that's a concern, that when there isn't an objective measure by which to measure this, that a resident that's calling in a complaint feel that it's objectively being measured. You know, you could have an enforcement officer show up at someone's home and not hear something that a resident is hearing. And then at that point, the resident's complaint, the resident can be hearing it, the officer is not, and then at that point, is it unreasonable at that point or not? Whereas if you have a decibel meter, a decibel reading system, well, now you have an additional level of enforcement. I'd like to recognize the Vice Chair on this item.
In addition to everything you said, the system as it stands now doesn't work the way we want it to, the way we need it to. We rely on residents to call in noise complaints, and code officers get to the location as soon as they can, by which time the noise may or may not still be going on. The code officer does or does not hear something. There is confusion about whether or not the resident is supposed to be able to be allowed to enjoy their balcony without excessive noise. A lot of people don't understand what that legal perspective is, that legal guidance. The code officer then goes to what they believe is the offending perpetrator of the noise, and then they get a phone call from the facility's owner or attorney saying, we have permission, we have a CUP that allows us to do this, or no, but we're allowed to have our speakers out on the sidewalk, or whatever. And so a code officer may or may not be able to withstand that kind of onslaught. And if a violation does get written up, it goes to the special magistrate, because the people getting the violation will appeal it to the special magistrate, and there is confusion. The special magistrate may or may not have the cup in front of him or her, may or may not understand the nuances of it. It is so subjective at every inflection point of this process. And we are getting more and more as a city, getting more and more requests to allow open air, maybe not technically entertainment, but effectively entertainment. Roof decks, whether it's a live DJ, which means it's open air entertainment, versus you know, a Spotify playlist just blasted out. There's an onslaught of venues where live music is being played to the detriment of everybody else, or including this room. No, I'm kidding. Not live music, but music. I mean, if you try to have dinner outside on Lincoln Road, and you're sitting in between 3 restaurants, you've got, you know, the music of the world coming at you, and you can't hear anything. My kid is a musician. I love live music. I love music of all stripes at many different volumes, but what we have now isn't working the way we intended it to. And I understand that years ago, decibel meters weren't good enough, the technology didn't exist, but every year they're getting better. I mean, Paris is doing it effective a few years ago, and I know that is for vehicles, but they have technology that is 4 mics that takes a reading every 1/10 of a second to triangulate the origin point. Mm-hmm. Sounds pretty good to me. New York City right now, through a partnership with NYU, is doing a program. I think the acronym is supposed to be pronounced SONIC, Sounds of NYC. I don't think it's so nice, but I think it's supposed to be SONIC. But basically, they're having people register and identify sounds from a community input, you know, level way of training the technology to recognize what sounds are sort of the cost of doing business in New York and what it sounds like versus something that's excessive. So for us to say this is what stands and this is why we're doing what we've been doing doesn't sound like that's good enough anymore, because it's not addressing the issues that we have.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I think what your points resonate so well, because it might be what is being upheld in court, but is it what is delivering to the quality of life of the residents and the taxpayers of the city of Miami Beach? Well, that might not be the same thing. It might be delivering in court, but it's not protecting the quality of life of our residents. And that's the core that I'm concerned about. That our residents be able to enjoy their homes, that they be able to rest, that they be able to study, that they be able to work without the interference of noise in their day-to-day quality of life. Commissioner Suarez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I fully support this program. I'm a little curious, why has it taken this long to figure this out? Well, why don't we have a decimal?
If I may, just for purposes of history, I initiated this item a while back. You know, perhaps Mr. Planning Director, was it in 2021 or 2022?
I think it was mid-2022 that you did the first referral.
I did a first referral on this. There was a study done that's attached to this item with the assistance of a consultant. We did a procurement for a noise consultant for the city's official noise consultant, and we did change that procurement to specifically be able to use that noise consultant to help us create policy that addresses decibel. Unfortunately, the last land use committee voted this down, but we have now the opportunity to put this forward. We are dealing with a tight time schedule, and I'm not sure we're going to send anything today to the full city commission. What I would like us to do is that if it is the will of the body, request that the planning director actually look into some of the models that the vice chair has mentioned, what Paris is doing, what New York University is doing with Sonic, and what other cities are. Philadelphia, I'm sorry.
And Philadelphia.
And Philadelphia, what they're doing in terms of using decibel measurements for the enforcement of noise incorporated into the report. We'll dedicate some time in order to have the consultant that we hired present on this. And I'm going to recognize Commissioner Suarez one last time, and I see a member of the public wishing to speak on the item as well.
As far as a legal concern, are there any legal challenges that we might face with this?
Yeah, yes, that's the downside of decibel-based systems. They're notoriously hard to defend in court. And if you don't win in court, you don't protect anybody. The system that we have has been upheld by the federal court, and so to that extent, we don't. This is the first time we've ever had a serious challenge in the last 20 years based on that. But putting that aside, maybe with advances in decibel technology, something could be done, and that's totally a policy call on your behalf. If you want to switch, you can switch, and we'll defend it. I'm not saying it's undefendable. It's just notoriously hard. I would advise that if you're going to do that, to complete the study that you originally had hired but that never got done, with the instructions that Commissioner Bott brought up about the examples of new technology and new areas that the consultant could look at. But as the director of planning said, you need some funding for that because it was never paid for.
Thank you. So what I would like us to do is, for the next meeting, because we're dealing with a limited time frame today, and we still have several items on the agenda, we're going to set aside some time for the next meeting to allow for the noise consultant to present their proposal, because it is a very interesting proposal that I've had the benefit of seeing, but I think this body should be seeing. And we're going to get the information about Paris, Philadelphia, and NYU. With that, I'm going to open the floor to members of the public wishing to speak. David, please come to the microphone. You have 2 minutes to speak.
First, I'd like to ask just a question. The question is, it's sort of like the tree that fell in the forest. What about when the resident doesn't hear anything in their home? Is that okay? If it's totally quiet in a resident's home, isn't that what we seek? I know that for me, it's always been sacred that nobody should be disturbing their neighbors. Certainly not a business. But what happens when there's a business operating that the residents don't hear whatsoever? I raise that as a question for you to think about. On a historical note, Tom, I don't know whether you're here. I know you're here a long time, and we know each other a real long time, but we went to a decibel system in the city. It had to be in the 90s or early 2000s, and quite frankly, the city bought $26,000 sound meters, noise meters. We all went to
Pulling up a sound meter on his phone.
I don't know what happened to my noise meter here. Don't allow. And I'm on the wrong thing. Boom. That's the wrong thing too. Here it is. Here's a noise meter. And I have all my, in Mangoes, all of my managers operate off of noise meter. In fact, I have microphones in the Sidewalk Cafe, and our entire sound system is based on decibel meters. When the city went to decibel meters and bought $26,000 decibel meters, I came to the microphone because they were passing an ordinance to go to decibel reading. And they passed it at 88 decibels is what it should be. And I went downstairs in front of City Hall and I did a decibel reading, and it was 91 decibels in the street with no music playing.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
This sound in level in decibels in this room is 91, average of 91 decibels. So you get an idea.
Thank you so much, David. We're going to move on to Mitch Novick on Zoom. Mitch, you have 2 minutes. You're recognized.
Good evening, everyone. Mitch Novick. I live behind Mangoes. I want to say noise attracts noise, and an objective mechanism should require entertainment noise to be contained within the confines of the property from which noise is emanating. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Wayne, you have 2 minutes. Welcome. You're recognized.
I think Laura is the one who stated it, that we're opening up more outdoor entertainment, and a lot of it is appearing in residential neighborhoods. I'm less concerned with the commercial districts because they're commercial districts and there's very little housing, but in residential neighborhoods, the noise needs to be mitigated. And we should only permit outdoor entertainment, BTRs, with the similar goal as the Good Time Hotel, which is I can't hear it at the residential places at the street level. So, you know, BTR, that's where you need to limit the noises on approval of BTRs in residential neighborhoods. That's the most paramount decision you can make, so that their noise doesn't penetrate residential homes. Commercialization is great, you know, mixed use is great, as long as it doesn't disturb life. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we're closing the public hearing, so we're going to continue this item to next month. Mr. Planning Director, let's ask the consultant to be ready to do a presentation, and let's get the information on the three locations mentioned by the Vice Chair. With that, let's introduce item number 4.
Okay, item number 4 is to discuss creating economic and zoning incentives to encourage the conversion of existing office buildings to residential, which ideally explore new incentives, economic or other, being used in other states rather than relying on existing options which we might not want to encourage, such as floor area ratio and parking incentives, reductions to the mobility fee, in order to increase the supply of available housing in Miami Beach.
Is there a motion to bring the item before the committee? Moved and seconded. The items before the committee. This item is being sponsored by Commissioner Bott and Commissioner Magazine. Commissioner Bott, you're welcome to introduce your item, followed by Commissioner Magazine.
I'll make it short and sweet, but, you know, when we talk about incentivizing new development, it's with FAR or height or reduction of parking or waiving this or waiving that, and we're not getting what we want as the city. And I say, you guys are all sick of me saying this, but you have to plan for the city you want, not the city you are. So how do we look differently at what we can offer the city? How do we look different at developers? How do we encourage adaptive reuse of redevelopment of existing buildings rather than tearing things down and building something in its place? And I will turn it over to my colleague, Commissioner Magazine, to add his 2 cents. And then you know, we really have to go far afield and think super creatively about what we can do to get the results we want, especially now. I mean, this is more so the case now than ever before, given what's going on in northern parts of our state.
Mr. Magazine, welcome. You're recognized.
No, thank you, and I'll keep it quick out of respect for you. Let me chime in here, not on the committee. Echo what Commissioner Bott said, and if people are looking at this and saying, well, why would we want new office space in the city when we're sitting here trying to incentivize existing office space, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. There's a clear bifurcation. There's a clear demand for Class A or Class A plus office space in our city. We've actually seen some of the highest lease rates in the entire country come in right here in Miami Beach for new yet to be built or yet to be completed Class A office space. But when you get down into Class B and Class C office space, there is a waning demand, and those are really the properties that we could target for looking to create some type of incentives, you know, across the board, the tried and true methods, but also with more of a creative thinking hat on. Because like I echoed earlier, I think the single biggest key to our city is providing the ability for more residents over commercial usages.
I'm going to recognize Commissioner Dominguez to speak on the item.
Thank you. I'm supportive of this item. I have done some digging on this in the past, and I was always told by the city administration and even builders themselves that it's very difficult to convert offices to residential, but there's no harm in exploring it. And I'd like to take the city administration's recommendation to continue, so I move to continue the item to the July 2024 meeting.
Okay, let me recognize the planning director to present on this item.
Sure. Mr. Chair, members of the committee, since the sponsors had wanted us to look at incentives that go outside of our normal wheelhouse, the standard zoning incentives, we had suggested that we continue this to July so that we can reach out to our grants department and our finance department to see what might be out there in terms of tax incentives and in terms of grants that could provide those additional kind of out-of-the-box incentives that might move that needle other than your standard zoning types of incentives for residential conversions.
You recognize
If I
Commissioner
may,
Bott.
yeah, I'm happy to give you the time, all of the time that you need to get to some really good creative ideas. And I know it is hard. However, I also know that this is happening across the country and people are doing it successfully and coming up with really creative and interesting ideas. I mean, people are able to take ugly, defunct shopping centers and make them into really appealing, cool, condos, I guess, or, not that I'm encouraging building shopping centers to convert them, but there's a way to do it, and we just need to figure out what that is. And, especially as we're choosing or claiming to be leaders in environmental resilience as well, the more buildings we demolish, the worse it is for our environment. The more we adaptively reuse, the better it is. So go at it. Let's see what you got, kid.
Okay, so there's a motion on the table to continue this item to the July 2024
I'll second it.
meeting. As seconded by acclamation, show that item adopted. Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 5.
Okay, item number 5 is to discuss potentially requiring commercial charter vessel operators to provide sanitation pump-out logs evidencing compliance with applicable sanitation laws.
All right, this item, is there a motion to bring this item before the table?
I'll move it.
It's been moved and second. This item is being sponsored by Commissioner Bott and Commissioner Rosa Gonzalez. Commissioner Bott, you're recognized to present your item.
This just seems like low-hanging fruit, one of those things that we don't have already incorporated into our laws, just because it didn't seem to be a thing that we would need to do. But as commercial charter vessels are more and more a part of the fabric of our business environment, this seems like a reasonable thing to ask for.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Who is, I believe the police department is present. Our Deputy Chief Paul Acosta is present to present on this item.
Yes, sir.
Acting Chief today.
That's correct. Lord help
Welcome,
us.
Chief. And let's try to keep it concise, but please welcome.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, Director Mooney, Deputy Chief Paul Acosta, on behalf of the police department. We did an analysis of Florida statutes that govern our ability to conduct enforcement out on the waters on certain items, specifically to this kind of topic. And we discovered that Florida State Statute 327.60 subsection 4D Delta governs a municipality in that they may enact and enforce a sewage pump out requirements for liveaboard vessels, floating structures, and commercial vessels, with the exclusion of commercial fishing vessels within any area of the jurisdiction. Additionally, and specifically to houseboats, under Florida Statute 327.53 subsection 8, the owner and operator of a liveaboard vessel or houseboat that is equipped with marine sanitation device must maintain a record and date of each pump out for the marine sanitation device and the location of that pump out station for a period of 1 year. Each record must be maintained for a period of 1 year after the date of pump out. This subsection does not apply to specific marine compost toilets that are manage human waste and that are in compliance with marine compost toilet technologies that comply with the United States Coast Guard requirements. Further, Florida Statute 327.64 subsection 4A alpha, local governments may adopt additional requirements for owners or operators of vessels or floating structures that are subject to the requirements of Florida Statute 327.53 to provide proof of proper sewage disposal if the vessel or floating structure is anchored in a mooring field or in a no discharge zone for longer than 10 days. Ordinances adopted under that particular section must be reviewed and approved by FWC. We, as the administration, are prepared to further explore the possibility of requiring that an eligible vessel applying for a BTR, as an example, maintain a sanitation or pump-out log that can be readily shown to both U.S. Coast Guard authorities our code compliance officers upon request during spot checks for both commercial and private vessels within the city of Miami Beach. As it stands now, our Marine Patrol cannot do these kinds of inspections, but we are open for that discussion if there's a legal path forward that we can be included in this type of enforcement and create such enforcement that provides some teeth so that we can hold folks accountable whenever they commit these types of violations. My colleague to the left, which is Major Robinson, may have additional information as it pertains to this type of process, or we can call up legal if they want to.
Thank you so much, Chief. Commissioner Bond.
I just have a couple of questions. If charter vessels or any vessels operate these marine compost toilets, or they claim to, how do we check to make sure that what they claim they have, they actually have? Like, if they say, oh, I don't have logs because I have a marine compost toilet, they have to show that they do, right? Like, you'd have to get on the vessel itself to check?
Well, that's my understanding. You have to actually check and inspect the vessel.
Major Robinson, you're recognized.
Yes, good afternoon. Ian Robinson, Major in charge of the Operations Division. I haven't really looked into the composting part of this. I know we're talking about charter vessels and compelling them to come up with some sort of log. Our Marine Patrol officers can stop somebody for a violation of, say, a wake zone and do any inspections. So life preservers, horns, if it's a requirement that they have this pump out log, can look at those. But that pump out log in federal law, we'd have to find out information from the city attorney's office because we're in a dangerous area there. And if, in fact, the city can enact ordinances that says that we can create it, then obviously we would code violation and/or a boating citation be attached to that if we're compelling people to show that.
And a second second question. If a charter goes out in the morning and then comes back and picks up a new crew of customers, or in the afternoon and then the evening, are they required to pump out between charters, or can they do it at the end of the day? Like, they could do 3 charters in a 12-hour period and not pump out until the end of the day?
I don't know. That's probably governed by federal law somewhere.
look into that,
as
too?
to the times, I don't. The city attorney might be able to look in federal law and see whether that's a requirement. I don't know where they come back from each one. They're required to pump it, or on the hour, or whatever the case might be. I don't know times.
I think that's something we should look into as well.
We can look into that, yeah.
Thank you. Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Most of these charter boats, they're making thousands of dollars an hour. Usually, I would say all of them do not have marine compost toilets. They flush the engines. They have holding tanks. And if we're going to go down I'm fully supportive of this item, by the way. If we go down the BTR route, where we require through your BTR that you provide pump out logs, we can say that you need to have on board a holding tank, not a compost tank. And I think that's totally acceptable.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to open up for the rest of the committee members. Do you have any comments? Commissioner Magazine, any comments? Okay. Is there a motion before the table? And what is the motion on the item? What is your motion, Commissioner Suarez?
I'll move it exactly how it is. Requiring commercial and charter vessel operators to provide sanitation pump out logs.
Okay. As part of a BTR process.
Yeah, through a BTR.
But we need to give these guys more time to come back with what that would look like.
Okay, so then the motion would be asking staff to prepare an actual item to bring back to committee. And how much time does staff need to prepare an item with the item sponsors to bring back for the committee's consideration?
Commissioner, I think by the next date will be fine for us. I think we can get together with legal and do some research on it. I think that'll be enough time for this.
So by the June meeting, we'll have an item.
What's the date on the June meeting? I'm sorry.
I'm not sure
Okay.
what date is our
June
meeting.
10th.
June 10th. So June 10th,
Maybe in July.
we'll have an item before us. And we'll take public comments since we're not voting on the item today. We're not sending anything to the city commission today. I'll open up public comment at the June meeting.
Mr. Chair, really quick, we did not include our partners in code for any particular comment because if it involved BTRs, I know that they should have a say-so in that development.
Sure, and they can speak at the next meeting.
Understood, sir.
And they can work with our colleagues in drafting that item.
Good enough, sir.
All right, so this will come back at the June 10th meeting of the Land Use Committee.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 6.
Okay, item number 6 is the discussion to expedite the opening of the Baywalk and move the development of the Baywalk up on the GO bond prioritization list and present the Baywalk plan to the LUSC committee.
Thank you. Is there a motion to bring the item to the committee? Move it. It's been seconded by the chair. Commissioner Dominguez, you've been leading on this item, and you've been keeping track of the Baywalk and making sure that we get movement on this. Thank you for being so diligent on this and for your incredible leadership. I want to recognize you to introduce your item.
Thank you. So this item was actually a Commissioner Mark Samuelin item, and he used to walk the portions of the Baywalk that were open every single day. So I am working to do what I can with the city administration to ensure that this project is completed. And the last time we spoke about it, behind the Mondrian, there were developer permits that were getting done, and the pedestrian bridge is dragging. Do you have any updates?
I do. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Mayor, Commissioners, good evening. My name is David Gomez. I'm the Interim Director for CIP, and I'm pleased to be here tonight to bring you this update. The portion behind the Mondrian, which we refer to as 10th to 12th Street, is undergoing the commencement process. They do have their permits. The developer is here to address your comments. If you'll recall, at the last meeting, they did set a start of construction of May 1st. That did change to May 7th, and I think there's another update tonight that they'll give you a little more information on. And before I step away and let them speak, they're also going to give you an update on the pedestrian bridge and their permitting process and where they are with that schedule.
Mr. Chair, are you okay with hearing from the developer?
So, yes, let's.
How much time will you allocate?
I'm just gonna, for a brief presentation on where we're at with the Baywalk portion and with the bridge.
Okay.
Yes. So who is going to be speaking on behalf of the development team?
Commissioners, how are you? Regarding the Baywalk?
Name,
Oh.
first and last name, and
Hector
who you're
Medueto,
representing for
and
the
I'm
record,
with
please.
Terra Group.
Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you. So in regards to the Baywalk project, right now we have all of our city permits in place. We had a DERM issue, which we reported last time we were here at Land Use. We met all of the items that DERM requested at that point. And then a week ago, they requested a submerged land lease, which we are in the process of getting. It's more of an extension, where the one that was in place expired. So Crescent Heights is working to get that reestablished. So we're expecting that to come through in the next couple of weeks, and we should be able to get things started.
Okay,
So-
and when do you anticipate having mobilization for the project?
So we on what we reported last time was May 13th, we'd be mobilizing. That would be a test pile, and then 4 weeks after that, we'd be doing production piles, and then after that, it would take 5 months to complete the work.
Okay, and when do you expect, so 5 months, you said, to deliver the work?
Correct.
Okay, and where are we with the pedestrian bridge?
So with the pedestrian bridge, and I'll bring Alice up because she's been working directly with FDOT, Alice Bravo, which we introduced her last time as well. On the pedestrian bridge, we submitted 100% documents to FDOT. We've got their comments. We responded and uploaded the responses in the FDOT system. Drawings are going to be submitted by the 10th, I believe is the date, May 10th, May 13th. And we should be able to get a response or a permit out of them by the end of the month. And then we have a couple drainage wells that we have to put in place, and we're applying for those. We expect those to be out early June, so we'll be able to mobilize by mid to end of June, and we should be able to start work at that point with the water main extensions.
Alice? welcome.
Thank you, Alice Bravo. Glad to be here and to provide you with this update. And we've been working very closely with FDOT and the various groups within the materials office, the construction office, the permitting office, et cetera. This final submittal should go fairly quickly since at the 100% level, we had a smaller number of comments. So it's just basically a final submittal for everybody to check off that the issues have been addressed.
And when,
Yes, yes.
once you start in June, end of June, how long will the pedestrian bridge take?
Pedestrian bridge is going to go to the end of 2025. So it's an 18-month schedule. Unfortunately, the water main extensions that were added and the drainage wells added approximately 5 to 6 months of time ahead of getting into structure. And then the structure would take us all the way to the end of December 25.
Okay. I've requested from the developer a schedule of benchmarks for the progress of these projects, and you've provided me with a schedule that shows utility work taking place. For example, in the
South
water
water
main
main.
on the south part starting in July.
Correct.
The north part, it starts in September, working with AT&T on relocation starting in September. In October, you're going to be working on injection wells associated with this. You're doing foundation work starting in November, superstructural work starting in April of 2025. Glazing installation starting in September 2025, and you go into other things like more of the finished product as the stucco, paint, railings, sidewalk, landscaping starting in August 2025 with final inspections for August of 2025.
Starting in August and going to the end of the year, correct.
Final inspections September through the end of 2025. That's for the pedestrian bridge. I just wanted to be clear on the record. The developer, it's a partner with the city on other projects, and is going to be working, I think, in more projects in the city of Miami Beach. I will be recommending that our city commission take into account the developer's diligence, the developer's adherence to the benchmarks in completing, in meeting these benchmarks before we, grant any grant awards that might be discussed at the moment, or before we, move forward on any potential other developments with the developer. I need to see advancement and adherence to this schedule in the interest of the stakeholders of these neighborhoods, and the same with a portion of the Baywalk behind the Mondrian. You've given me a schedule for completion, and I don't know if you could just put that into the record as well, the benchmarks that you've set for.
Correct. And if you look at the last page, actually summarizes it in kind of a graphic month to month with those same benchmarks.
Okay, so for the Baywalk, Durham approval in May, where's the city's permitting? Where are we with the city permitting?
That's done.
All right, the test piling is starting in May?
Correct. Well, May
May.
13th is when we're trying to get the test pile in, and we'll be able to, 2 to 3 weeks after that, we should be receiving production piles, and we can start putting those in place.
And that starts in June?
Correct.
And then you move forward with beams and cap in July, the walkway and deck in August, and with inspections and approvals from October to December.
Right.
And so again, as with the benchmarks established for the pedestrian bridge, I would like for us to entertain a motion that we recommend to the city commission that we hold these benchmarks and the developer's adherence with this diligence in the consideration of any grants or in the consideration of any development applications that come to the city, to make sure that we're advancing with these promises to the taxpayers of the city of Miami Beach. Madam
I don't have a copy of
Commissioner.
that.
Oh, I requested, this is something I had requested.
Will you share?
Yes, of course, of
So-
course. It was not on the
sorry,
agenda. It was
I
part of
started-
my
I started
briefings.
talking and I have copies here.
Yes,
I'll-
it was part of my
have
briefings that I
copies here.
requested, yes, yes, but,
It's gonna give me a fresh one.
yes, without all my scribbles. Mr. Attorney, is that, I don't know if what I stated is proper, and if you need to restate it in any other way.
No, no, that was fine. The only clarification I would make is is for the city commission to take that into account as to future public or public-private developments.
Yes, if someone would, I don't know, there's a will in the body to make that motion, because I can't make the motion.
I'm not sure I'm clear. Like, I'd like to hear this again June 10th to make sure
Yes.
that May 7th and May 13th and some of the other items happened.
And we can continue this item to our future meetings, but I would like to send this recommendation. And Nick, if you could restate what my motion is for the for the committee's purpose.
I will do my best, and feel free to step in. I understood the motion was to transmit a recommendation to the city commission that the city take into account the developer's diligence and adherence to these schedules when awarding or negotiating or reviewing any future public or public-private development by this applicant. Is that right?
Right,
Okay.
development applications or grants.
Okay.
Yes. So I can't make the motion, but if.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, it's moved by
second.
Commissioner Suarez, is seconded by the Vice Chair. I don't know if there's any other discussion, comments on this, Commissioner Magazine.
Not on your motion, Mr. Chair, and I want to be concise here. So this is more for city staff and perhaps a follow-up in email out of respect for time. You know, the one glaring hole I think that we're going to have is going to be behind 800 West Avenue, because within 2 years, we're going to have the pedestrian bridge completed, then 500 call it West Avenue, that's Bentley Bay, then we're going to have the Floridian already completed, and then to the north of that, we're going to have South Gate, theirs is already built, behind 1,000, 1,100, and 1,200. So we're going to have contiguous except for under 800. And as I understand it, that actually falls on the city. There's funding in place, but for the city to acquire some of those permits and actually do the construction, I just don't want us to have an egg on our face where all of our private sector partners have essentially done their part, and then the part where the city has to do, we're just sitting there holding the bag. So, David, maybe if you can follow up, not now, I want to respect the chair's time, but maybe if you could follow up via email where we stand on that and how we're moving forward.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
And if you could confirm, we have been in conversations with 800 West.
800 West is the one that's changing the management company. We're trying to schedule that meeting.
Okay.
So they've asked us to wait until they finish that process. We have met with 1228 and 1250. And that was just in the last couple of weeks. So that process is moving.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other comments from the dais, members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none. With that, we can show the motion adopted by acclamation, and this item continues because it is on our monthly agenda. And again, thank you, Commissioner Dominguez, for your leadership on advancing the Baywalk. With that, Mr. Director, let's introduce item number 7.
Okay, item number 7 is to review zoning districts where entertainment, which includes nightclubs, is a permitted or conditional use, and consider amending the land development regulations to list nightclubs, entertainment as a conditional or prohibited use in specified zoning districts.
Before we proceed with this item, just to make sure that we're in proper form, is there a motion to extend our meeting, let's say, by 30 minutes?
I'll make the motion.
It's been seconded by the chair. Is there any opposition to that? Well, let's.
No, I was going to slip out because I feel sick, but 30 minutes.
30 minutes, yes, 30 minutes so that we can get through this. So with that, Commissioner Suarez, this is your item. You're welcome to introduce it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, given what has happened over the many years in Miami Beach where we've had issues with particular nightclubs. I think Miami Beach has reached a point of maturity where we as a community don't have to tolerate a relic of the past of these nightclubs moving forward, where they bring in big name DJs, and the events pop up during spring break, Memorial Day, and that's how they survive. And so the intent of this item is to kind of graduate from that business model and move and incentivize toward a more Mila or Queen supper club model for the city. And I wanted to check the temperature of my colleagues on this and see how you guys feel. But certainly, I think Miami Beach has matured enough where we're beyond that now. And the type of nightlife and entertainment that we'd like to have in the city gears more towards supper clubs. So, and I'd like to have Nick sort of explain more in detail of what the details of this are.
And Commissioner, given that these are technical options that the planning department has developed in consultation with us, I would ask Tom if you could go through some of the options.
Sure, you want me to go through that
Yeah.
now? Okay, through the chair, I'll go ahead.
Through the chair.
And I will summarize what we put in the memo. In the memo, as you'll note, we provided a summary of all the areas of the city where entertainment, including dance halls and nightclubs, is currently permitted. And this would include the CD2 district, except for Sunset Harbor, CD3 districts, the MXE district, RM2 and RM3 districts, accessory use only, very site-specific in RM1, there's only 2 sites as a matter of fact, as well as the TC1, TC2, and TCC areas that are specific to North Beach. Additionally, there's 2 areas of the city that have a 2 a.m. closing time for alcohol sales, which is Alton Road from 5th Street to Date Boulevard, as well as 41st Street. Some of the things that we looked at in terms of trying to better incentivize the supper club model, or the performance that is associated with the restaurant model, included presenting some options under the analysis that could potentially achieve that objective. This was a dual referral to the planning board, so any recommendations of the land use committee we can take directly to the planning board as an ordinance amendment. But some of the options that we came up with include the following. Within the RM2 and RM3 districts, prohibiting outdoor entertainment outright. Right now, outdoor entertainment requires conditional use approval regardless of where you're located within the city. Indoor entertainment within these districts would only be permitted as an accessory use to a hotel. It would no longer be permitted as an accessory use to an apartment building or an apartment hotel, and would only be permitted as part of a restaurant in accordance with the revised criteria that we suggested for a supper club, which is in item 8. Indoor entertainment, regardless of occupational content, would require conditional use approval, and the occupational content for a venue with entertainment would not be able to exceed 300 persons. So again, within the RM2 and RM3 districts, these would be much smaller types of entities. Within commercial districts and MXE districts, outdoor entertainment would be prohibited within a venue that is less than 1,500 feet from a residential zoning district. So if your venue is more than 1,500 feet from a residential zoning district, you could continue to request CUP approval. But if you're less than 1,500 feet, you would no longer be able to ask for that, and you wouldn't be able to have outdoor entertainment. Indoor entertainment would also be limited to part of a restaurant in accordance with the revised criteria for a supper club, and indoor entertainment would also require conditional use approval regardless of the OC load. However, there would be no OC load cap like what is proposed for the RM2 and RM3 districts. If there's consensus on these or any other potential recommendations, we could include those in a draft ordinance and bring it to the planning board.
Commissioner Bond.
So, is there any place where you could have entertainment as of right without getting a CUP?
Under what we've come up with, no.
But if you fit the criteria and you applied for a CUP and you were granted it, then you'd have a path forward. So
Correct.
it's not a prohibition, it's just giving some more structure to people trying to do this.
Correct.
Okay.
But there will be certain areas where outdoor entertainment would be prohibited.
That's correct.
Where right now, I think there's certain, for example, there's certain residential RM zoning districts where currently outdoor entertainment is permitted, and under the proposed language, it would be prohibited. Is there any other prohibition that this would be creating on allowed uses at the moment?
Yes, it would be the proposal that we've come up with. Right now, in RM2 and RM3 districts, you could potentially request a conditional use approval for outdoor entertainment. The other thing that this does is it would limit indoor entertainment uses to those associated with a restaurant. So you would no longer be able to do a standalone bar or nightclub or dance hall with entertainment. It would have to be more along the supper club model.
And this is only, so this in essence, if I read this right, and if I interpret this right, existing operators then would be continued to operate in a legal non-conforming manner. And then new operators, would they would have to apply for a CUP. In certain areas, they wouldn't be able to do it if they fall within a certain distance of residential as well.
That's correct. This is prospective.
Prospective.
So it's not meant to affect existing legally established businesses, but you are correct. Anybody who is now legally established could potentially become legal nonconforming.
Legal nonconforming. Now, let me ask you this, because it's something that I want to study further, because I've sponsored legislation myself on this, to get certain uses and make them pretty much prohibited prospectively, which in turn makes the remaining uses, let's say like certain convenience stores or certain packaged liquor stores, let's say packaged liquor stores, where we've prohibited them in certain areas. But then those that are existing become legal nonconforming. And the unintended consequence of that, I feel, has been almost like, well, now that they're legal nonconforming, they never want to go away. They permanently want to stay there, because it's almost like a taxi medallion. Like the taxi medallion, you have it, it's something that's coveted, it's something that you'll never be able to get again, so you don't want to give it up. You don't want to transfer from one location to another because you can't. And where a nice restaurant could go in, or where a beauty parlor could go in, or where some other use could go in, now you're stuck with the use that you don't want, because someone just doesn't want to give it up. And that's my only, unintended consequence that I would say that I would just caution us on and figure out how do we address that if the intent is to transform. I like the idea of incentivizing supper clubs and higher end entertainment uses. I also think we need to realize not everyone can afford to go to a Mila. Not everyone can afford to go to a Queen. That is the reality of the diversity of our community. Not everyone is privileged. Not everyone has a Black American Express, but they still want to go out. They still want to have a good time, and might not be able to afford to, go to a higher priced place like that. So, I think this is good conversation that we're having. It certainly is positive policy for the safety of our community and the quality of life of our residents. I just want us to be aware of potential unintended consequences as we discuss this. Commissioner Dominguez, you're recognized.
Thank you so much. I too want to study this further and make sure that we're not having any unintended consequences. Miami Beach became iconic because of our beautiful beaches and the nightlife that we had. And I have enjoyed going to Mila and to Queen, but there's also something to be said about going to, whether it's Don't Sit on the Furniture or Mr. Jones or some of the other establishments that we have. To have an entire city with nothing but supper clubs, that's not everybody's taste in entertainment. And so I definitely want to study it further because I think we have some good operators out there, and I don't want to have unintended consequences.
I have a question. You know, and I'm going to do what the attorneys have always told us not to do, especially as it relates to alcohol legislation, because I think we've only have considered probably like 30 of them over the past couple of years. But let's say like an establishment like Nathan's. If this were to pass, would an establishment like Nathan's be able to open? And I'm asking, I'm doing something I shouldn't do. I'm asking a question I don't know the answer to. So like Mr. Planning
I
Director.
probably couldn't answer that because I don't know enough about Nathan, the detail of Nathan's operation. If they're a restaurant and they meet the criteria for kitchens and food sales or whatever criteria is developed to ensure that these are truly restaurants, and they meet that, then they would, if they have an entertainment component, they would then require conditional use approval.
Let me ask you this: a situation like the Gathering. The Gathering is, you know, at the western end of Lincoln Road. I don't think that they have a restaurant component to it. If this were to pass, would they be able to open? But they would be able to because they're a hotel.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and under this proposal, the Gathering is zoned RM2. And while hotels are not permitted within the West Avenue RM2, they are permitted in other RM2 districts. The Gathering, though, they have a very unique status. And so if they wanted to do modifications to their interior that are consistent with allowable accessory use to a hotel, they would be permitted under this to add a restaurant. But I would want to double check those West Avenue regulations to make sure that there was no entertainment prohibition.
Okay.
Assuming there's no entertainment prohibition, they might be able to add it.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Suarez, is your item?
Yeah, look, there are no unintended consequences. The intention is to move forward and mature as a city beyond nightlife. I think we've hit an escape velocity on what drives our city. I don't think that we need nightclubs and night entertainment that has severely impacted our quality of life to be known for Miami Beach. That's not our brand anymore. Our brand, as I envision it, is residential, resident-focused. It's the beaches, it's the water. It's not the nightlife. And I think, we're having a great discussion on that. And that's my vision of the city. Obviously, I respect everyone's opinions on here. But I just, over the years, over the decades, I've seen these nightclubs, pop up. They really decimate the quality of life in the neighborhood, and then they leave, and then they open up somewhere else. And I think this is going to set up a better criteria for the entertainment that we want. And sure, we can have a lot more discussion. I'm hoping perhaps at the planning board, perhaps even at our commission, through multiple readings. I think we all need to chime in on that. I just wanted to see where you guys felt with this idea.
And if I may, I think I'm hearing you. I think one of the things that we have to keep in mind is that supper clubs, like for example, Mila. To what time does Mila operate?
Mila had to get planning board approval. I think their hours are either till 3 or 4. I
Till
don't.
3 or 4.
Yeah, I don't
So-
think they go to 5. I think the
4.
planning board puts some limits on it.
So if the intent is to, follow something like the Mila model, Mila, goes up to 4. Queen, I think Queen operates till what time?
I
it's 5?
think Queen has a 5. I don't know operationally how late they typically.
But they got a
go.
CUP.
Yeah, they
Right.
got a CUP as well.
But I just want us to realize, I want us to be careful. I want us to be careful because I get the intent of what you're trying to do, and I think so many of us here are probably aligned with improving the safety, the quality of life, maturing as a city. I don't want that to be confused as, we only want to have establishments that, nighttime establishments that cater to a wealthy crowd, because not everyone in Miami Beach is wealthy. And unfortunately, I don't want our policies to create that. What I would encourage you is, I think, get some of this feedback, start drafting an ordinance with the city attorney that then we can review here before we send anything back to the city commission, so that we can more, formally, review an actual piece of legislation. You've presented a general idea. You've received some feedback from your colleagues, and I think we can continue this item to the next month, where we can review an actual ordinance for consideration before we send it to the full commission.
So Tom, what did, through the chair, what was prepared? It was a set of options, and the chair is proposing an actual option to pick from, which is an ordinance?
That's correct. What we did was we put together some different options based upon the referral memo that are included in the land use memo, and I think, and Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're suggesting is that those options be developed into an actual ordinance that
Yeah,
this committee
I
could
don't feel comfortable today without seeing an ordinance to send something to the city commission. I think we've all given feedback about this that should be incorporated
fine.
into an ordinance. Let's bring that back over to the committee so that we can vet it and then have a proper public hearing, hear from the community on this item, which I think it's a very impactful item, and we just can't pass without seeing an actual ordinance drafted. All right, so
fine.
let's
Yeah,
continue
it's
this
fine with me.
item. How much time does the administration and the city attorney's office feel that they need for this?
The basics of the ordinance are ready, so I can draft something pretty quickly, show it to Nick, and then we can meet with the sponsor and then iron out any details. So I think we could bring an ordinance back to you on June 10th.
Okay, and the one thing that I think we should be mindful of is that we do have a mixed entertainment district. The mixed entertainment district is a part of our economy. We do want to diversify there, but for me, I think it's important. We want to protect the quality of life of our residential neighborhoods and perhaps some of our other commercial corridors. That means we also need to, have a certain area for fun, for entertainment, for tourism that helps sustain our economy. We may want to better define and tailor that, but I do think that entertainment district is an important part of the character of our city, but we just need to fix it. We need to improve it so that we can all coexist. Commissioner Dominguez.
And then just one last comment, because you did nail it, the tourism aspect of it. While the quality of life for the residents in residential neighborhoods absolutely need to be protected, we also have areas that have hotels. We have 22,000 hotel rooms that are part of our economy, and it's also important.
Thank you. With that, let's continue this item to next month, and let's include in that maps, please, and if we're talking about distances, let's show a map with radiuses as well, not just zoning districts but radiuses as well. Thank you, Mr. Director. Let's introduce item number 8.
Okay, Item number 8, which is a companion to item number 7, is to adopt minimum requirements for restaurants seeking to provide entertainment in order to incentivize supper clubs and restaurants offering indoor performances within districts that permit entertainment. This is also a dual referral to the planning board.
I'll defer my item to the same June meeting.
Okay,
so that
you
we
wanna
can- It's the
prepare-
same, yeah, it's a companion item.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, as it relates to incentives, I think that, you know, I personally feel much more comfortable with incentives. But if you want to draft an item, I don't know if my colleagues want to offer any input, so that our colleague can take our input into consideration as he's drafting, this item. Because I want you to be, you know, successful when you come back.
Could I,
with an
Mr.
item.
Chair, just because we don't
Sure,
get a chance
yes.
to talk outside of the sunshine? I agree with the carrot over stick, and if there's places where they are problematic. We had a nightclub on Washington Avenue that had shootings, called Cameo, right? And
Right.
they're shut down. Look at that building. If not a nightclub, what it is going to be? So perhaps we look at some of these story nightclubs. You know, Commissioner Dominguez was fantastic, you know, kind of getting them out. But now if it's like, if it's not a nightclub, then what is it going to be? So we could look at some, you know, land use incentives to say, if we don't want 5 a.m. nightlife entertainment there, what do we want it to be? And provide a carrot.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other feedback for our colleague on this item? Yes.
On the story, and this will be good news for Joe, Commissioner Magazine, they're thinking about doing a residential project there. More to come. I haven't seen anything concrete.
Though
but
I do
that-
stay out later than some of my colleagues, so, yeah.
Vice Chair?
No, Commissioner Suarez, I really, I like where you're going and trying to reimagine what we are going forward, and I am supportive of that train of thought. I don't want us to be, become so homogeneous in what we are allowing to happen, because we're not, you know, what if somebody came up with a great concept that doesn't quite fit into our existing framework? And we do need to have things for people at all different stages of life and income levels and interests. So I definitely support the idea of cleaning it up and making it, putting tighter guardrails on it. But I don't know if, and I agree with Commissioner Magazine that incentives are always better than, you know, carrots are always better than sticks. So I don't have concrete ideas of how to make things different or better. I just want to keep that balance in mind of not legislating us into Naples.
And Tom, before we defer this, because I think just for the benefit of the public, what are some of the initial recommendations that the administration has presented for potential incentives?
So one of the things that we wanted to try to do was clean up the definition of what currently constitutes a restaurant, because what we found currently is that there are certain benefits to having a restaurant component as part of your entertainment establishment in terms of things like distance separation. And so right now, under the definition of restaurant, basically these nightclubs can have a minimal kitchen and serve bar bites and then meet the definition of restaurant. So one of the things that we're suggesting is that the definition of restaurant and the requirements for restaurants and the full kitchen facilities be substantially upgraded so that these really truly are restaurants serving meals, and that the restaurant is the primary component of the operation as opposed to kind of an afterthought or something tangential. And then if they meet this established criteria, these establishments would be able to go to the planning board and obtain entertainment for larger loads for these types of supper clubs.
Great. Okay. So we're going to defer this item to the next meeting. Mr. Attorney, aligned with the intent of kind of cleaning up our image, I do think one of the things we do need to address is our side streets. I think, you know, that really is a lot of the ailments that we encounter in our city, especially as it relates to the entertainment district. If you'd work for me on a referral to this committee to discuss the minimum size for restaurants facing side streets in the entertainment district. We have a lot you know, for lack of a better word, fast food establishments that attract, you know, it's no secret. We've seen it, you know, during spring breaks and other periods, you know, it attracts criminal activity outside of some of these establishments on the side streets of certain areas of our city, especially in the MXC. I think we need to look at what is the minimum size for some of these restaurants on side streets in the MXC, and possible requirements that they, if you're gonna have a side entrance, that it also have a front entrance to the main corridor, or what other criteria we can put in place to address the issue of these small fast food establishments on side streets. So if the two of you could work on that referral for me, and if anyone wants to join, you're welcome to. With that, we have one last item on the agenda, which is item number 15. Mr. Director, we could introduce item number 15.
Sure. Item number 15 is to discuss a proposal to convert the Clevelander to a residential project with no outdoor entertainment.
Okay, is there a motion to bring this item before the body?
I'll move it.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, the item is properly before us. This item is being sponsored by the City Attorney's Office. Nick, I'm going to recognize you to introduce. Yes. Well, no, actually, we can't.
All right. And Mr. Chairman, this, members of the committee, this item was originally placed on the January City Commission agenda at the request of the property owner. The update I can give you since the Land Use Committee meeting of March 19th, at which the committee directed us and the Planning Department to meet with the property owner, is that we did meet with the property owner on March 27th and discussed the developer's proposal in detail. Staff at that meeting recommended that the height of any new project on this site not exceed 75 feet due to the established, the developed context of Ocean Drive and the surrounding district, particularly taking into account the importance of the historic scale of Ocean Drive and the Art Deco Collins Avenue Historic District. The developer responded that a height of 150 feet would be the minimum that would make their project work. And so given the significant disparity between staff's recommendation and where the developer is, we would need additional policy direction from this committee. Now, since the March 27th meeting, the developer has submitted, as recently as this week, a revised presentation that I think they'd like to make to the committee today, and that the revised project would be one tower at a height of 139 feet on the Clevelander property.
Okay, thank you. Before I open this up to the interested party, is there any comments from the body, or do we want to move forward to the presentation?
I think we just move forward.
Okay.
Oh,
I have to leave
Commissioner
soon.
You have to leave soon, okay. Actually, we need to make a motion to extend the meeting. So how much time we would like to extend the meeting by? Let's say 15 minutes?
Yeah, that's fine.
15 minutes, you can say? All right. So is there a motion to extend the meeting? Moved second by acclamation, 15 minutes? Okay. Mr. Tashmas, you're recognized for a brief presentation. I also, after your presentation, I'm going to open it up to members of the public.
How much time, Mr. Chairman?
Let's say 5 minutes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, I'm Alex Tatsmas for the record with the law firm of Sutton Bowen. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to bring up and introduce Kobe Karp, who will give a presentation for the latest massing, which is now at 139 feet. I just want to reiterate or actually state the position of our client that we have been working with the city since about January of this year and trying to arrive at a settlement and a compromise position to resolve all the issues that are pending.
A settlement, I'm sorry, let's pause the clock for a moment. Settlement on?
Mr. Chairman, this began as my discussion with Rafael Paz to try and settle all the matters that are between us and the city, which includes litigation and includes the Live Local Act. And so this was intended to be a global settlement of those issues, and that's how it was referred to this committee at the end of January.
Okay.
So I just want to indicate that this is the client's additional attempt now to try and see if we can make this work. We are far apart from staff. Staff was at 75 feet in height. We are now down to 139 feet, which unfortunately is as low as we can go. So we are seeking the vote of this committee to conceptually approve the project for 139 feet and send it back to then design a project with staff at that height. So now I'll turn it over to Kobe, who can make the presentation.
Thank you so much. My name is Kobe Karp, and I'll be quick. I have 3:50 to go. Let's just go through the images, if you can. Pull them up for a second. Next image, please. So kindly, next image, please. So kindly next image, please. I'm trying to move it quick as I go. I got the control. Thank you very much. Let's see, is this the one? Right, bingo. That's what we started, that's what we submitted on the original submission. It's about 200 feet with 180, with 18 floors. We met with certain individuals in the community. They thought it'd be nice to break it up into two buildings, which we did. One on the north side of the, basically we have two. We have one on the south side of the Clevelander, and then we have another one on the other side on Collins Avenue on the north side of the annex. What we did is we studied those two buildings together, and when we came along, some people said, you know, Kobe would be nicer, or Kobe and team, to go back to the single building. We don't like the height, and we also do not like you coming back and putting two buildings. So we said, okay, we'll go back and study the single building. We studied the single building floating up in the air, and more in line and curve with the Essex. This is just a massing, it's not a design. But what it did do, it allowed us to bring the height down by projecting it over the alley at 139 feet. And at the same time, as you can see in these images, preserve and restore not only the Clevelander, but also the Essex on Collins Avenue. And that allowed us to have preservation, restoration of the two buildings and not touch the annex. So we went back and forth and looked at the massing, and this is a context study of neighboring buildings that we have. This is important to look at, because when you look at the real context of the neighborhood, historically, contextually, and right now, you can see that the buildings that have been built, the Tides and other buildings historically, we put the heights there, have been built to a similar height. And that's why we are here in front of you, that hopefully you will be gracious enough and allow us to go back to work with staff, who is at 75 feet. I have been able to bring it down. We do have an opportunity to bring back and restore the Clevelander and bring it back to its original glory. But if you are able to give us the time and opportunity to work with Tom and Debbie and staff, that would be greatly appreciated by us. If you can't, then that's fine too, I guess. But I love you guys, and I hope you're kind enough and do seriously give us the opportunity to talk to each other and continue the communication, because I think that at least we have been going in a positive direction. I think that staff historically, for the short time that I've been able to live and work here in Miami Beach since 1988, has been very educating me, providing me with context and my clients. So I think that it would be nice to continue the dialogue if you so allow us. Thank you for your time. I have 55 seconds left. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I get 60 more seconds, please?
You have 50 seconds.
Thank you. I just want to reinforce that this is a unique transformative project. So this would feature the closure of the largest outdoor entertainment bar in Ocean Drive's history, and it would change Ocean Drive forever. We would abandon our CUP, and that's something that has been discussed by city officials for at least 10 years or more. That's what we're talking about. And it's a unique opportunity, and as I said, it'll be transformative for Ocean Drive. The other issue I will tell you is, you know, we have a Live Local Act pending in front of you. It would be much smarter for the commission to work on a project collaboratively with us where you can control what is built there, because the Live Local Act will not provide for public hearings. You can get commission input, HPB input, et cetera, if we can work collaboratively towards this project. Thank you.
I'm going to open up the floor to public comments. Daniel, you're welcome to speak. Anyone wishing to speak on this item, if you could please line up by the podium. I'm going to keep the brief to 1 minute, please.
Okay, sure. All right, thank you, Commissioners. Daniel Serraldo with Miami Design Preservation League. So first of all, I did want to thank the owners from the Clevelander and their team, because I know they have been working hard and reaching out to different stakeholders and looking at different options. I think the concern that still remains is whether this is compatible with our very precious Art Deco historic district. And it seems like, in looking at the imagery, that there's still a real lack of compatibility. And I want to point to a couple of things. The new building would basically cover the Clevelander, or like smother it. 2/3 of it looks like it would be enveloped by it. And also just the fact that this is probably ultra luxury housing, not the housing that Commissioner Magazine and others are really pushing for, workforce housing. So I think at this point, probably they said best and final, maybe time to say no and move on to other ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm going to go on Zoom. Valerie Navarrete, you have 1 minute to speak. Welcome. Valerie Navarrete, you have to unmute yourself. All right, you have 1 minute to speak.
Okay,
Welcome,
hi.
Valerie.
So sorry, I'm losing connection. Thank you very, very much. I just would like to say one thing. Ocean Drive, it's a very, our postcard, just like the Eiffel Tower is a France postcard, and the Coliseum and, oh my God, I don't remember the other one, is the Italy postcard. So please, just keep Ocean.
We're losing you. We've lost you. Welcome. You have a minute to speak. Welcome.
Ocean Drive. Not a derelict spot on Washington. It's Ocean Drive, the center of Ocean Drive. I've lived here for 26 years. I've seen the town go up and down and up again. I am telling you, you will kill the South Beach economy if you privatize the most famous public street in all of the United States. You can't force us to become suburban Boca Raton. All of my friends from the ballet, they don't have money to go to supper clubs and this and that. They all go to Please Don't Sit on the Furniture. They do go to Monty's. They go to the Clevelander. There's nothing wrong with these establishments. Please don't be seduced by a see-through rendering with no parking. It has no sensibilities of Art Deco. It's just a big giant cube. And please don't be seduced by dinner and drinks with the developers from out of town. Please don't turn Ocean Drive, our prized possession, into a condo alley for maybe like 100 out-of-town people, when we could be millionaires, by the way. We could be revitalizing our retail for everybody.
And your name for the record?
Andrea Spiridonakos.
Thank you so much. Mitch Novick, you have 1 minute. Welcome.
Hi, good evening again. Mitch Novick. My concern is parking, concurrency, and most importantly, the impact on infrastructure. If something like this should pass, it should not open the door for others along our prize strip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mitch. Are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? David? And anyone else wishing to speak on this item after David? If not, David, you are the last speaker.
Just briefly, it's all in the math. If you want residential, then you have to give the square footage interior-wise for a developer to make money. If they're not going to make, and I was advised this by one of Miami Beach's greatest developer, if someone can't make a 15% profit, they're not going to do the job. The cost of the land, the cost of everything, the cost of the profit, if you don't do the math and you don't give the height, you're not going to have any development. And that's as simple as it is.
Thank you. With that, we're closing the public comment. Colleagues, feedback from the body on this issue. Commissioner Suarez, you're recognized.
Yeah, there's a lot of, everyone's saying we don't want to turn into Naples, we don't want to turn into Boca. But up until this year, Boca didn't have a shooting problem every year. or a sex trafficking problem in our city. You know, I think it's disingenuous to claim that. I mean, you know, people get shot on Miami Beach, and I want to move away from that element. And I'm always going to be in favor of resident-centric values. And, you know, I don't know where I stand on the Clevelander project, but I think a big, certainly a big carrot in front of us is, you know, we're going to remove an element that has notoriously been an issue for Miami Beach for decades, and it's outdated, and it's a relic of our past, and we need to move forward. You know, I certainly love Ocean Drive. I walk down it almost every night on my nightly walks, but some nights I can't walk down it because I don't want to. I'm in fear of my life. So I welcome to hear what everyone else has to say.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee are wishing to speak on this item?
You know, when this came before us a month ago at land use, I remember specifically saying, if you want to go big, you've got to give us something that looks like it's been there contextually forever, and certainly not this big. I mean, the two thinner 12-story towers seem to be a little bit better than this. I know this is a massing study. I know this isn't a design. I understand that, but this also is not even close to contextually appropriate for Ocean Drive. Sure, if you go across the island all the way to the bay, you'll find towers that are this high. But if you look north and south on the postcard, the front door of not just our city, but of South Florida's tourism, it's wildly out of scale. And I'm not, you know, I'm happy to consider options. But I don't feel like we're getting anything that we can seriously consider. I mean, if you'd come back to us with 100, maybe that would be a conversation we could have. But 139 it's absurd. And I understand the math doesn't work. I get that. I'm you know, my background is business. I've got that. But at the end of the day, it is not. Real estate is a gamble, and if you overpay or somebody overpays for a piece of land, betting on the come that they can develop what they want with it, and maybe they can't, then that's, you know, the thrill of real estate. Sometimes you win and sometimes you don't. But I feel like this is not a step forward in the conversation, and I'm really sorry to say that because I love the idea of working together, to be collaborative, to be trying to find a best solution, to my colleague's point of trying to limit some of the behavior that we don't want to encourage, and to have a seat at the table to help bring about a better offer, a better vision for what comes next. I'm frankly, I was disappointed when I saw this.
The committee is still speaking. Thank you.
No, I mean, that's it. I'm disappointed that I'm disappointed. Because I do think this is a great example, a great opportunity to lead by example. And we saw it at Ocean Terrace for most of that development project when, you know, the developer came to the community with something that the community said, thanks but no thanks, not over in a million years. They came back to the table with a lot more nuance and thought and, you know, kind of working together with the community to try to put something together that worked for everyone. It wasn't perfect, and there were some bumps along the road, but I think when that comes to life, that will be something that gets generally embraced. And I was hoping to see that here, and I haven't here. So I know it was, you know, positioned to us as our last best offer, and I'm like, well, or what? We sleep with the fishes? Like it seems like a little threatening in the nicest possible way. But I'm not there yet. I don't see anything to even negotiate with, and that's I think a real shame.
Thank you. You know, Mr. Planning Director, under Live Local, what are they entitled to under Live Local?
Well, there's two live locals. There's the existing live local that is in effect now, and I'll let Nick correct anything I might misstate. But they have submitted an application under the current live local, which allows a project that has at least 40% of the units being used as workforce and affordable housing to utilize the maximum height that is zoned within a mile of the property. However, it does not contain an FAR preemption. And so when they had submitted their Live Local project, I believe it was late last September or early October, we had sent a follow-up correspondence with them identifying a number of deficiencies. One of them being that Historic Preservation Board approval would be required for any demolition that is proposed. As was mentioned previously, the Florida legislature this session did adopt amendments to the Live Local that could potentially preempt us on FAR. However, that legislation, to the best of my knowledge, has not yet been signed by the governor and technically is not law.
Okay, so what are the heights?
So under within a mile of this particular property, the maximum height currently zoned would be 150 feet.
150 feet.
Correct.
And so we're being asked to move forward with something that's just 11 feet below what they would be entitled to under Live Local.
In terms of height, yes.
And under Live Local, they still have to go, is there any lot aggregation that they proposed in their Live Local?
So under their Live Local application, they had proposed combining two sites, the Essex site, which fronts Collins Avenue, and the Clevelander site, which fronts on Ocean Drive. Under that proposal, they would require an alley vacation to
An
combine
alley
the two
vacation,
properties.
and who can approve of an alley vacation?
The City Commission.
The City Commission, doesn't that require a referendum?
If they're proposing to move FAR between the properties, that would require voter approval.
And did it involve any changes to the historic structure?
Yes, they had proposed the demolition of an annex structure on the Clevelander site, which was approved in 2001, and they had proposed the partial demolition of the Essex Annex fronting Collins Avenue and the partial demolition of the historic Clevelander fronting Ocean Drive.
So they're coming to us with a proposal. They're selling to us a proposal that's for a building that's 139 feet high, as opposed as the benefit to the public, as opposed to doing the Live Local, which would be 150 feet in height. But that would still require an alley vacation that requires voter referendum, and impacts to historic assets that require HPB approval.
That's correct.
And affordable housing.
Right.
That's correct. And Nick, if anything that was inconsistent, please let me know.
No, that's correct.
And let me ask you this: at the last hearing, I had said, I'm okay for us to engage in conversations if we do away, if they agree to do away with short-term rentals. That was. Please, if you're not speaking, I want to ask everyone, please be seated. The last time that we discussed this and we engaged in, we said, let's move forward in conversations. I asked, I'm gonna do that if they agree to no short-term rentals on the property. Was that agreed to as part of the negotiations?
I don't believe the developer has agreed to proffer a prohibition on short-term rentals.
So then are we really then changing the demographics of Ocean Drive then? Then we're just creating the opportunity to have hotel rooms on Ocean Drive instead of residential. Yes.
Perhaps they're willing to,
I'm sorry, I'm asking questions so that then I can recognize you. But I'm asking the questions that I need answers to.
Yeah,
So you're welcome to come and be recognized, but I let all my colleagues speak, and I think you would agree that as the chair of the committee, I should have an opportunity to ask questions, correct?
I'll wait
Okay, well, you're recognized.
But just before, through the chair, I was under the impression that it's always going to be residential. And, you know, that's going to be a little different for me if it's not residential. So I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, I just want to make two comments. One, Commissioner Abbott, the instruction of the committee at the last meeting was for us to have a working session with planning staff to try and get to a project we can both live with. That didn't happen. So we met with staff and they said, under the Gelber administration, we've already determined the maximum height we can support is 75 feet. We didn't have a chance to talk about mass siting, moving things around. That was not the case. So what you're seeing today is a massing study only. It's not a design, it's not massing, it's not siting. But it's not productive for us to go back to staff unless they have direction that we can go to 139 feet. Because at 75 feet, it simply is a project that will not work. But we did not have the chance to have something in the nature of what you describe, which is a great deal of collaboration on the sensitivity of designing something. And then Commissioner Suarez, the project is designed, would have hotel where Clevelander and Essex is, and then residential. There will be no short-term rental in the new tower.
Okay, was that explained to our staff when these negotiations were taking place? Because I just asked our staff, and our staff is indicating that that was not indicated to them.
When we had our, in response to your question, Mr. Chair, when we had our discussion, we did not discuss any terms such as a proffer for no short-term rentals.
Right. So for me, having no short-term rentals is essential. I don't think that dropping from 150 feet to 139 feet, I don't think what's the benefit? I mean, what is the benefit to the taxpayers? Ultimately, they proceed with the Live Local proposal that they had. Ultimately, our electorate will have a say. Would have a say in approving this ultimately then at that point, because there will be the allocation, and it'll be our residents who will say, you know, whether it can happen or not. I do want to see a transformation. I want to see an improvement. I don't see that improvement happening at 139 feet. I'm willing to ask our staff to look beyond the 75 feet, given now that Mr. Tashnas has said on the record, which I didn't have that in the past, that they're agreeing to not having short-term rentals on the property. That is a difference. Right now, there's transient use on that property. Is that correct, Mr. Planning Director?
Yes, it's a hotel use now.
It's a hotel use. So it's not only nightlife use, but it's nightlife use mixed with hotel hotel use. So, you know, just going in and already saying off the bat, it's going to be completely residential with no short-term rentals. That's different. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm okay with 139 feet, because I don't think that is fair. I think it's disingenuous. We're giving up 11 feet. You're giving up 11 feet. That to me is not a real, you know, that's not coming to a middle ground. But I am okay saying, let's have a conversation about going beyond the 75 feet. And what I would say also is that, you know, we trust our Historic Preservation Board as the experts on historic preservation in our city. And if we do recommend that we engage in a conversation of going beyond the 75 feet, that it go before the Historic Preservation Board, whatever would come back to this committee for their input before we make any recommendation to the City Commission. Because ultimately, it's something that they're going to have to weigh in on. And what I don't want to do is send Mr. Tashmas, Mr. O'Brien, and the other people involved, Mr. Karp, running around circles and us discussing something that later the board with jurisdiction over the matter doesn't agree with. So we need to get their input in this process as well. Colleagues, Commissioner Magazine.
Could I just clarify something? Because this is completely new to me, and maybe I was asleep at the wheel, but it changes my calculation entirely. So for them to file a Live Local application, the voters would have to approve to vacate the alley?
The Live Local application that the developer filed back in October contemplated joining the two properties, the Essex property and the Clevelander, and it contemplated an alley vacation.
And the alley vacation under the provisions of our charter would require for it to go before the city's electorate.
Right, but is that like what they're tied to? That
No, they
application?
could file a different Live Local
Right.
application from what they originally filed.
But they preserve their rights with a certain application.
They can file a new Live Local application.
Okay. So I agree with the chair that giving up 11 feet, it bangs, juice isn't worth the squeeze. I'm conflating a few things, right? Two comments I will say. Mr. Serrato's comments really struck about compatibility, and maybe there's a question and one thing we keep in mind about compatibility. If they would go forward under Live Local, does that completely remove us from the table of any input in design? Does it have to go to the DRB or things like that?
Through the chair, any demolition of any portion of either the Cleveland or the Essex would have to get the approval of the Historic Preservation Board. That's something that's not preempted under Live Local.
Yeah, but the actual construction, when we're talking about compatibility, if they did a Live Local, they could just build a glass box that looks like Dubai. But if we actually would strike some sort of bilateral DA, then we would presumably have input. So, right?
Well,
Well-
this being in the historic district, it would have to go to the HPB.
Yeah, that's correct. Whether they go under Live Local or they go under some path, like a revised ordinance or a settlement, any demolition would require Historic Preservation Board approval.
Right, Tom, get that. But for the construction, right? If they do Live Local, can they just then build whatever they want without any DRB input? I'm talking about compatibility. So Mr. Serrato says it has no Art Deco themes, which I agreed with. The glass box looks terrible there. But if they went the Live Local route, they could just do whatever they want, where if we did a bilateral agreement, we would have input on the design.
So under Live Local, in Historic District, it's a little bit more nuanced because in Historic Districts, unless you're dealing with a vacant lot, if it was a vacant lot with no building or improvements on it, they would not have to go to the Historic Preservation Board. They could get site plan approval administratively. However, if there are existing structures on the site, they clearly need Historic Preservation Board approval for the demolition and may require Historic Preservation Board approval if they're doing something over an historic building or new construction that contemplates partial demolition. It starts to become a little tricky because as part of the certificate of appropriateness for demolition review, the Historic Preservation Board can ask to review what will take the place of the demolished structure.
And then just one question, I'll pass it over to colleagues on the board. If they did a Live Local, would they have to give up their CUP? Because presumably, you could do a Live Local, 40% workforce housing, hotels on the rest, and then keep your CUP?
I don't think they would be required to give up their CUP if they did a Live Local.
How?
So I guess that is the other
I mean,
thing that we have to weigh.
it may require modifications to the CUP if the Live Local project involved changes to the site. Yeah, I mean, I think it very likely would require
A CUP is
modifications
tied to a site plan that's filed,
Right.
that is a legal document that's registered with the courts.
Right.
That if you're gonna change the site plan, that you need to reopen the CUP, in which case, then at that point, it's open up, and it's open up.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
But also, if they're proposing 60% of the new development be high-end residential, they're not going to want to have an all-you-can-drink wet T-shirt contest kind of place in their courtyard. I mean,
I don't know, some people might pay a premium for that.
Maybe you can charge double, I don't know. And I know that's not what you guys are doing now at the Clevelander, I get that. But there have been moments, and my point being that it would not likely be this raucous kind of place if you're trying to get top dollar. But And, you know, I'm all for giving you guys, us all, one more shot at doing this. And I know you said the numbers don't work at anything less than 139 feet. But 75 to 139, you're asking for double what we are telling you that we want. And so that's not compromise. And so I'm begging you to figure out a way to make this work at something that we can rally behind. Let us hold you up as a great example of what can be done here. Because it's, I don't know, maybe you don't need gold-plated finishes in the guest bathroom, but, you know, find a way to make the numbers work.
This isn't the Trump Tower. Mr. Tashnas, I see you want to approach.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Commissioner Bott, I don't have the authority tonight to say we'll do anything below 139 feet. But what I will tell you, though, is that...
I'm going to interrupt you there. If we cannot have a discussion about anything below 139 feet, I don't know if it's worth wasting your time, Mr. O'Brien's time, and your team's time. I'm just going to be very sincere and frank with you. I just, you know, if you're telling us, if you're telling this body, in this public setting, that you're stuck at 139, you know, that's not a negotiation. What do I tell my representatives in Tallahassee when we've been going over there and fighting to preserve that postcard from preemption on the protections that make it that is trying to destroy it, to be overdeveloped, and we're there fighting them and telling them, no, give us the authority on local rulemaking to decide on the protections to protect this iconic postcard. How do I tell them yeah, thank you for giving us that authority to decide on our historic districts. Guess what? We did exactly what you were going to do. We allowed for historic assets to be demolished and to be replaced with a glass tower. I'm sorry, if we're going to move forward in any sort of negotiation, we need to be with the understanding that we're going below the 139, because if not, it's not worth wasting your time, and I certainly don't want to waste my staff's time, because that's a taxpayer's money that we're spending when we're using their time. And so I need affirmation here that we really are coming to the table to go below the 139, because it's not going to move forward otherwise.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'll say one thing to clarify. Our proposal, we are not demolishing any part of the historic structure that is contributing. So the annex on the Clevelander is not contributing and will be demolished. We've been saying from the beginning we're preserving the historic structures on Clevelander and Essex. Any comment to the contrary is not accurate. As far as the height of the project, the only thing I'll tell you is that this is a complicated project, okay? I worked with Kobe on the Four Seasons Surf Club that took us 5 years to do. These are complicated projects. It's impossible to really make a lot of progress when planning staff is not willing to collaborate, rolling up your sleeves on what the project could be.
Our planning staff is following the directive of the body that they represent, which is the body that is elected by the residents of this city. They're following that directive. And the directive was to negotiate within a certain criteria. And so what you're hearing is that there may be an inclination to continue, to allow our staff to continue in these conversations if it is an understanding that we're going below the 139. And but if we can't get that, then I'm not going to waste your time.
Mr. Chairman, we've come back with many massing studies, starting with last year being, I think it was 30, then it went down to 18, then it went down to 150, then it went down to 139. 75 feet is just too far apart from where we need to be in order to close.
But with all due respect, I'm sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chair.
We're running out of time.
But there are a lot of numbers between 75 and 139. And
Through the chair. Perhaps we defer this to the next meeting, and you certainly have a direction from us. I mean, short-term rentals is one thing that certainly needs to be, presented for me to even be on board. And, maybe, look, it's gonna
You mean no short-term rentals?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
David's all for short-term.
I think there's willingness here to make something work, but I
You're
think
not hearing a no from us.
Yeah, I
but
think
you need to meet us somewhere.
that's, by the way, that's saying a lot. And I think it would behoove you to take that advice and say, all right, we're willing to negotiate.
The problem is our staff cannot sit down with you unless we're here saying that we're okay with them sitting down with you. And you haven't brought us to a position where we can say we're okay with them sitting down with you to look at anything over the 75 feet. And so we want to be able to negotiate and to talk, but you're not giving us anything.
Mr. Chairman, it's at 8 o'clock at night. I'm happy to call our client first thing in the morning tomorrow. As I said, I don't have authority tonight to agree to anything below 139, but I can call them in the morning tomorrow.
Mr. Attorney, guide us here so that we're in proper posture.
Well, this is the committee's meeting, right? So if your consensus is that in order for staff in my office to continue engaging with the developer on this proposal, that number needs to come down, then the ball is in the developer's court to come back with a revised proposal.
Well, I'll tell you, only do it and don't come back to me and tell me it's 138. Or 135 for that matter. And if we do move forward with anything, I don't want anything coming back to this committee unless it first goes by the Historic Preservation Board, because I need them to understand that we're being serious, that, yes, we want to be partners, but we want to make sure that whatever moves forward is something that, number one, it's going to make sense, but also encourage them to really negotiate, knowing this is first going to go to the Historic Preservation Board for an advisory input before it comes back to this body.
And just to be clear, what would go to the Historic Preservation Board is you would like the developer to present, I guess a concept plan for for the height of a project, for the massing of a project.
Whatever you guys negotiate as representatives of the city before it comes to us here, for it to stop by the Historic Preservation Board.
Is that, through the chair, is that typical? Usually,
Well, this committee has asked for our land use boards and for other committees to provide non-binding
Advisory.
feedback.
Yeah.
So if your recommendation is that the developer meet with staff again and then bring something to the HP board for their input, we could probably come back to you in July with the HPB's advisory.
Yeah,
It would be
and because this-
non-binding, it wouldn't be an application, but they could probably give you some advisory comments.
Yeah, if the interested party agrees, to go below the 139 to covenant the no STRs.
And just for the sake of clarity, no STRs, I'm assuming below 139 doesn't mean 138, right? I'm assuming you're going to want to see a meaningful reduction.
Yes, and Commissioner Dominguez.
And also to factor in parking, because who's going to buy a multi-million-dollar condo and then not have a parking space? So.
All right, any further questions?
No, Mr. Chairman, the only thing, again, I'll speak to our client. I know our goal was to do this collaboratively. We're the
Yes.
ones who started the discussion, just to be
Yes.
clear. And if we didn't want that, we wouldn't have initiated that.
Of course.
So I just want to be clear that we're the ones who started it, and we said, hey, we want to do this collaboratively.
Yes.
The other thing I would say is.
But just realize collaboratively, without being collaborative, you could have done 150, but to be collaborative, to say 139 is something that's collaborative is really not very collaborative.
Well, but the closure of the Clevelander Bar is a massively important carrot. So we can't be treated like a generic developer just looking to put up a project in MXE. It won't work. And that's the unique nature of what we're proposing.
And does that mean that the Clevelander is going to abandon its 5 a.m.?
Yes.
All right. And that's something that the HPB should
Well,
then
the issue
consider
would
as
be,
well.
the main issue is to abandon the outdoor entertainment CUP. So no live music, no music above background levels. We'd have an upscale restaurant with perhaps background music outside. That's it. Maybe we would do a late night 2 a.m. establishment, I don't know, but that's a massive issue. So to approach this as if we're any generic developer on a piece of vacant land to build something, it's not.
And we're not approaching it that way. We understand the importance of this asset, and that's why we're giving it the seriousness and the attention that
I mean, the one thing I would say, Mr. Chairman, if you do say to go back, some direction needs to be given to staff so they're not stuck on 75 feet, because if that's the case, there's nothing.
Well, I think it's been pretty clear from this body. We've given the direction. If the interested party says that they're willing to go below 139, for our staff to be willing to go beyond the 75. We've made that clear. We've said as a condition of us having any conversation beyond the 75 feet, be a contingent on a certain number of stuff that we've discussed here, that I think we've already discussed in the past, by the way. This is none of these things that the body, just to be fair to this body and to be fair to our public resources that we're investing in this conversation, this is nothing new. This is not breaking news. We have enumerated all of this already in the past.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So we'll put this on the agenda for July. We
Okay.
can plan on coming back here. Please try to be at HPB for June, the latest. Thank you, guys. With that, Mr. Attorney, anything else for the good of the order?
No, sir.
With that, we stand adjourned.
I'm sorry.